Okay, so it's going to be a 9-round event today
Okay.
at most. If there's a low undefeated by round 8, I'm assuming it's 8 rounds, but for the most part, it should be 9. And,
I believe there is no top cut for this tournament, actually.
oh, craziness.
So we're just
Okay.
playing till one undefeated's left.
That's awesome. Whoa.
So it should be probably 9 rounds is my expectation. But yeah. All right.
There we go. We are ready to go, guys. So,
Yeah.
yeah, like we mentioned before, this is going to be Luffy versus Karakuri. And in this matchup, from what I know of it, the Luffy deck is one of the red decks that is a little bit slower, more going for one threat a turn type of gameplay, and yellow is quite good at absorbing pressure when it comes to larger creatures as opposed to a go wide strategy. So we're going to see if this Luffy can keep up the pressure in the early to mid game, or if the Karakuri player can start dropping those 8 and 10 drops during the later portions of the game. So going to see how good the Luffy player's early game is, and he has double searches, so it looks like he's crafting a decent hand from these.
Yeah, for sure. Looks like that's a nice wanted poster added to the hand there. Very beautiful. But yeah, double searcher is a great start. Nice to be a little bit aggressive in the beginning. Obviously, this deck is a little bit slower than we're used to something like Zoro that can really pump the team for these searchers, but able to use that nice effect of being able to add Arrested Dawn does put some aggression on the category side, which is important.
And we see here the first key player indicator of how the Karakuri player wants to approach it. He wants to also apply pressure and race the Luffy player in this case. He's decided he's not going to try to starve out the Luffy player after these 2 searches, so he's going right ahead and attacking.
I'm going to go ahead and put that to the bottom. Sure.
With the leader on his second turn,
So
putting
we got
a life
bottom?
to the bottom. Yeah.
Yep.
And then Luffy player, pivotal turn here. Let's see if the Luffy player has a 3 or 4 drop to really start applying pressure. And I want to see exactly what assortment of bombs the yellow player has. Some people opt for more of a 7 drop line closer to the ground. Other people like to go for a higher count of 10 drops. Definitely the 7 and 8 drops are going to be really important in this Luffy matchup specifically because they're a little bit faster than the 10 drop. So I want to see what the yellow player's ratios will end up being. But right now, attacking for 7 with Luffy, like we said, we want to guarantee as much damage in the early game as possible, so he's doing that here.
Yep, and we added Nico Robbins to the board to add more pressure on future turns here. We'll be able to blow up something like the pudding should that actually be used to try and swing back on the Namis later or something, I think was the intention there. But instead we're able to pop that with the Nico Robin if we have nothing else here.
And it's very key. We want to be able to answer this pudding effectively just in case the 8 drop wants to go ahead and place it in life. But actually the Karakuri player is very much prioritizing getting aggressive here, going in for a 5 swing, just taxing the hand a little bit. Let's see if a 1 or a 2K is used. In this case, a second copy of Nico Robin. It's very convenient here. And this pudding is not going to absorb that much pressure. Probably one of these switches is going to swing into it. But I kind of like this aggressive take on the matchup from the Karakuri player. And I want to see if he has another 2 drop that can efficiently swing if he's opted for this line.
I think the only problem with playing a 2 drop here is that you did see the turn 1 Nami add 5 drop Marco.
Oh, yeah.
So playing something like a Sanji will lose its effect by that Marco coming down. But it looks like instead maybe we're holding up Ikiku Sovereignty, maybe Arrow as the new card. But
yeah, so leaving up a defensive event here, if his hand is a little bit on the heavier side, this opening indicates that, and this is the turn that Luffy can decide to capitalize on placing a character in play and then Adana under the Nico Robin, getting rid of the pudding while also making an effective attack, and then we'll see what other threat he can develop.
it looks like we're looking at 5 with Nami, trying to add one of these Straw Hat crews.
He's contemplating a jet pistol, I believe, and honestly that would be a decent card to pick up if he has something like an Otama, get rid of one of the future AKs that'll be in play. Goes ahead and adds it to hand just to have that contingency plan. Otherwise, it can tag a 6K. The Karakuri players have many of those available, a lot of 5Ks as well, so this is a good card to leverage the board here.
We do see the Nico Robin swing in to the leader, using its ability on the Charlotte Pudding like we had talked about. Countered out with a Shirahoshi from hand to get out of that attack.
And then from this point forward, I expect a 5, and probably that Luffy he searched out, the one poster Luffy to round out the turn with a 6. Definitely want to try and guard both those attacks on this turn just to keep a safe life total of 3 moving into the mid game here. The Luffy player, like we mentioned, doesn't apply that much pressure in terms of, small characters. It definitely goes one threat at a time, but at the same time, not a very strong opening from Karakuri in the early turns, attacking with that pudding. Not terribly efficient against the lines of play that Luffy has taken, so definitely want to see what bombs the Karakuri player can make here.
Right. So we're considering a couple options here. I would like to see probably out of the board in some fashion. I think you can just play a Marco and let the effect not do a whole lot, but let the body really speak for itself. Something like that would be good here.
Yeah, so he's debating here, like you mentioned, using the Marco for an effect just to apply a body in play, alternatively trying to get a rusher in play, and just to see, if you play a character that doesn't have rush on this turn, you can go ahead and swing with it next turn, plus attack with the rusher on the next turn, being a little bit more efficient with the turn sequencing here. And like you mentioned, the Marco comes down, and now he has a good amount of attackers. I expect this Nico Robin to not survive the turn, but still decent pressure from the Luffy side.
Yeah, it all depends if we need all 7 Dawn here to be able to play like something like a 7-drop. Because if we do, then Nico Robin's probably going to live. 2k from hand would just save it. But yes, if we can equip the 1 Dawn, swing really over it, Joker will probably just let that go.
Yeah, so here... And does he slam a 7-drop? Depending on what he has in his hand, does he want to play a 4-drop knowing that the opponent picked up a jet pistol? So 7-drop would be a lot more optimal here. He opts to attach 2 Dawn. Let's see where he goes ahead and swings. We've seen him be aggressive during the course of this game, but in this case he clears the board, which is wise.
Going to let that one go, I think. Have enough pressure on board. You can soup up the Namis and the Izo to get through, should they be necessary.
And here, a 5-drop 7k Yamato will be pretty decent into that jet pistol, but we only have a 5k here, so...
Smoothie is fine. The effect isn't going to get much use here, as we are pressured on our life already. Not that we will really use it, but body on the board is also important. Attack back on the Marco when it attacks this turn, something like that.
It's also good, even if the Luffy player ends up jet pistoling this threat, it takes up a good amount of his Dawn for the turn, so you just have to play into it and react to whatever the Luffy player does. And also running out of board space, replacing the searchers isn't going to affect the Luffy player that much, but he does only have 1 character slot left, so he's going to have to start replacing those soon.
We will need to see the Katakuri player defend themselves here in a way so that they're able to land something like a 10-drop in a couple turns, because I think that's their plan to buy back into this game.
Yeah, so went from 4 to 3 and got a cracker to try and attack back on this Marco or the Luffy player himself, and definitely looking toward that 8 and 10 territory on the following turns.
Right.
And will we see him prioritizing healing himself with the 8-drop or getting rid of this Marco? I think this Marco is, at least for right now, the only huge threat, so I would like to see something like an 8-drop tag that.
I think so, yeah. I think adding it back to the bottom of life buys you time, gives them a bad card at bottom of life for the future, and then the searchers can be used, but they do cost a number of Dawn to get them going.
And this cracker is actually incredibly important because it insulates against the uses of that jet pistol. Jet pistol, like we mentioned, taxes the Luffy player for the turn, and now you have an attacker on the way back for this Marco, and you also have all your Dawn moving into turn 8, so
yeah,
very good to get that life trigger for the yellow player on this very pivotal turn.
Right.
Would be able to manage the board a little bit more.
Yeah, Zoro hits the board, and we use the Luffy ability to equip that 1 rested Dawn onto it, making a 6k attack.
An aggressive take on this 6k, not using a 2k for this attack in particular. I would like to know how much defense the yellow player has in hand. Indicative that he's pretty confident to go down to a little bit lower life here.
We did see earlier holding up 2 Dawn as an opportunity for maybe a defensive
event.
Yeah, event to cast, but since we haven't seen that since, it's not sure if that's a bluff or if we still have it. If we still have it, then yeah, we still have some defensive capabilities to be able to get through some stuff here.
So here, priority number 1 would probably be attacking a few times into the Zoro to see if the Luffy player wants to just let it go or not. I suspect he's going to defend it as much as possible.
Yeah, he's got a decent-sized hand, I imagine. Things like Nico Robins definitely aren't at their best effect towards the late game. Better early, so a fine pitch out.
Go here. Yeah, so going 7 at 5 is pretty confident a number. Let's see if the Luffy player just wants to. No, so he lets the Zoro go, prioritizes just playing rushers from his hand from here on out, and we see a 7 drop. So
Okay.
choice here is to burn. Very wise because we want to try to end the game in the next couple of turns for the Luffy player. So just decides I'll lose a life and try to end the game as quick as possible. So good choice there all around. And now his first 10 Don turn. Let's see how many eligible attackers he's going to have
that bag,
this
homegirl.
turn.
About that bag.
I'd like to see the Luffy side get pretty aggressive this turn. We're going to need to close out this game before the 8 and 10 drops start running away. So I'd like to see some equip on the searchers, attacking in, burning through the hand, and trying to get our opponent down to probably 1 life would be the expectation at the end of this turn.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, the Luffy player wants to highly prioritize as much as possible, putting the opponent either at 1 or 0. Leaving them at 2 would make it way too comfortable for the 10 drops to come down, go to 3 life, pass turn, you know, refuel the hand, and then have a 10 drop in play. So we want to prioritize as much as possible, do like a bit of a semi all-in and just take these 2 life and make it as uncomfortable as possible for the yellow player to play that 10 drop. So that should be his priority number 1 this turn. Alternatively, he can go ahead and try to control the board a little bit. You see a 2k defending here, so it could just be that the yellow player is oversaturated with 2ks in his hand. The Luffy player can use that information to his advantage. Maybe start attacking with these 1 drops.
Yeah, I'm trying to get a look at the hand here, the category player. It does look like they have at least 1 Thunderbolt in hand, which will definitely cause some problems. Does look like arrows here to defend. We are at 2 or less life now, so decent use of that.
Yeah, so that's a good arrow on the Marco. Arrow, a new addition to the yellow deck, a very good defensive option, making a yellow version of guard point and very effective against this 7k attack. And now we see 5 drop Luffy that was searched out earlier. And I would like this attack to most likely go face. Like we said, we don't want to end the turn with the yellow player still at 2 life. So.
Right. I think we could go something like 7k at face, hope they take, and then we can do something like 5k at the smoothie and force them to figure something out there. You could do it in the opposite order if you wanted to. Attack the smoothie first to make sure that we're not giving another card in hand to counter out. But
yeah, so very, very important key to know. Attacking the smoothie first would limit the amount of options that the yellow player has to defend it. And
okay.
Go ahead and heal a life. Oh, okay.
Yeah, trigger Okiku Sovereignty, discard what looked like another Okiku Sovereignty plus 10 drop from hand to get out of that and heal 1 back. So I think we're
out of cards in hand?
I think we're out of cards in hand, which does signal that the smoothie is free game now.
Yeah, so going ahead and 3 Dawn, dealing with that smoothie, and then leaving 1 up would be quite good for a defensive guard point or radical beam, and then let's see if he's thinking about replacing and doing a Machina play, which would be fine as well. I like just using the Dawn.
You could Machino, make a 5k, swing 5k at face then with the last 3 Dawn as well.
Okay, so just getting another eligible attacker on this turn.
Yeah.
Luffy just getting as much value as possible out of these attacks. And hoping actually that the yellow player gets a blank on the life here so that he can go ahead and put him down to 0 life on the turn. Very interesting line of play. Just leaving the smoothie there. Doesn't think that he's under duress of going down to 0 life and losing next turn. So he's just saying, I'm going to attack you as much as possible. Take advantage of the fact that you are at 0 cards in hand. And
or we're going for the kill now.
Yeah, I like this aggressive look from the Luffy player, just understanding his role in the matchup. So
attacking in for 5 again.
And ignoring the smoothie, also a decent play here. Oh, and he did get a 1k from hand.
Okay.
Decent gamble from the Luffy side. If it is a blank, you know, he ends up taking the life going down to 0. Even if it's something like a 10 drop, he can't comfortably play it onto this board. So I like the attack sequence from the Luffy side.
So now we're up to 10 Dawn. I don't think we're safe to play a 10 drop here. I feel like we'd be too pressured in our life still to really feel comfortable with that.
Yeah, definitely something like maybe having an 8 drop and then hoping that the last life is something like an event would be the best chance of surviving. Clearing the board here also doesn't really put up lethal on the following turn, so a very difficult position from the Karakuri side. But we're seeing him just try to go for game, which, you know, honestly, The wisest choice. I don't think he has another turn cycle, so he's just trying to say you better have the defenses you left. This smoothie up, so hopefully this smoothie can get it done is what the Karakuri is thinking.
Yeah, you can try and go for the kill here. It's something like 11-11-10, I think, or 11-10-10.
And we see, well, spoiler alert, there is a radical beam on the side of the Luffy player, and that is probably why he was so comfortable with leaving the smoothie alive. If he didn't have something like that guard point available to him, maybe he would have gotten rid of that smoothie. Played a little bit more defensive, as
Sure.
it is one of the only ways for the yellow player to have 3 eligible attackers on this turn. But he decided, I have enough counter power in my hand. I don't really need to worry about it. Going for that put you at 0 life plan.
Which I think is fine if
Was
you
his
have the
choice.
defensive abilities.
Yeah.
Something like playing around a Brûlé trigger that might mess up your end of turn game plan would be smart to get out of the way at least.
So here I expect the final life to be taken. And then just end this all in. This is probably going to be the attack he stops. Make sure he covers all bases. Show them the bad news. And
Yep.
I believe that's going to be that.
And we're coming in.
10 lead.
Yeah.
We'll take that last life if we can.
Great game, bro.
And that
that'll
looks
be
like
the
a good
shake
game right there.
so
Yeah.
Very
Handshakes.
Very well played from the side of the Luffy sequencing. Like we had mentioned, that Marco first into the rush Luffy, just maximizing his attacks per dawn effectiveness, and to be critically important here, Kinemon wanting to go second for that a little bit of extra card advantage as well as tempo advantage, but he actually ended up going first, and no searcher on turn 1 going first. Rob Lucci having the 2-drop 3K, so very much in the favor of Rob Lucci in this early game. And then let's see what Kinemon can do moving into his 3-dawn turn.
Looks like we're taking a shockwave there. That'll be a nice answer for something like an Okiku that might come down.
So here, seeing an attack for 6K because he's going to go ahead and use the leader reduction, play an Okiku like you mentioned. And at this point in time, Okiku, very, very good when you go second on turn 1. Let's see if the same tempo applies when he is on his 3-dawn turn playing Okiku, because it does give a little bit more space to the Lucci player. The Lucci player deciding to actually attack here, so always considering what role players have in the matchup. This Rob Lucci player deciding that he wants to aggress a little bit, going into the green player, sometimes starving them is a line of play, but this Rob Lucci is full steam ahead, attacking turn 1 and then playing a 3-drop blocker.
Yeah, on this turn, I would assume that we're going to see Okiku have a Dawn equipped, and we're going to attack in like we tapped down the Fukuru, as that's the thing on the table that's threatening the most. Even though it doesn't threaten very much, it does threaten stopping the end game a little bit.
So for sure, he has the highest amount of presence on board, being a blocker that can be KO'd through effect. So going ahead and dealing with him in the early game through combat, and then using the leader effect again to tempo out another Okiku. These Okikus in the early game are going to help deal with some of these blocker threats. And let's see if the Rob Lucci player can play onto the field something that doesn't get tapped down as efficiently. Attacking for 5-on-5 here.
I think makes sense if you're going to play a Sakazuki this turn. Otherwise, you would overswing. So
Yeah, so hopefully Sakatsuki not being able to get tapped down by these Ukikus and also dealing with one of them. But instead, here we're going to draw a card with the Kuzan. And this Kuzan, even if it gets tapped down, doesn't feel too terrible. Did replace himself, draw a card, and absorb a little bit of pressure. So not the most optimal turn. It would have definitely been Sakazuki, but you got to play with what you have in this case, and this Kuzan is not too bad at absorbing a little bit of pressure here.
yeah, I think it works because we know he added Shockwave here, as I soon realized after I talked about it. But we're able to take out one of the Okikus, which is a similar play, but now you're saving a life as well. So that's not bad. I do also like that.
Yeah, so fantastic absorbing pressure with the first Okiku with the Shockwave and then dealing with the second one. Definitely a line of play that the Kinemon player was aware could occur. Maybe he is prioritizing playing some large character card on this turn, and that's why he went ahead and forced out the Shockwave. And as I mentioned, Kree comes down. Very important in this matchup as it can take multiple lives at the same time.
Yep, and I'm sure we'll see a discard here. Take out this Kuzan. It's a little bit of card disadvantage as the Kuzan did draw a card coming in, but you're buying back tempo on the board, and that's so important from the Kinemon side.
Yeah, exactly. And also, through that, defending this Okiku. If the Okiku untaps again, it can go ahead and swing, get a little bit more value. So, bodyguarding that is the Krieg effect. And how does Rob Lucci respond here with only 4 cards in hand, it looked like? So he's right now running out of resources, at least in hand, because he still has 5 life. So he's definitely going to have to refuel with those at some point. But here, dealing with the Okiku, very important to use your Dawn effectively in order to get rid of that early game pressure. And it looks like, from what I can see, he's playing the Navy version, maybe a heavier Navy package, so he might have 10 drops in this deck. And then, as I say that, Bluno comes down, so there you go.
Yeah, I think it was just an awkward draw probably here. But Bluno is obviously showing the CP side of this. We'll see Kumadoris and things like that getting the effects here with that, I'm sure.
So a hybrid build coming from the side of the Lucci player. A very popular build, popularized by players that got second place a few weeks ago in online event. And definitely the hybrid build is pretty consistent. Having access to both searchers in a field of Zoro is very important. And they can also help in this Kina matchup as well. But we see 4-drop come down for 3, tap down this Bluno, and I want to see if this Kinemon player actually prioritizes dealing with the Bluno in play or attacking some of this life. As the Lucci player has low cards in hand, I want to see this Bluno be prioritized.
Yeah, I think you can actually prioritize board pretty hard, and that's kind of been the idea, I think, from the Kinemon side from the get-go, is that we're going to starve you on resources a bit, so you're not going to have much going on.
So here, taking advantage of the fact that the Bluno is tapped down, maybe indicating that the Kinemon player actually has even more tap down effects in his hand, and the Bluno will be dealt with for the foreseeable future, not prioritizing attacking it, and taking 3 life in 1 turn from the Lucci player. So Kinemon deciding to turn the corner on this particular turn, and if he went for this line of play, he does have to make sure to end the game in the following 1 or 2 turns, because he just gave the Lucci player a lot of resources to work with. So
I think it is smart from the Kinemon side. We are under 6 cards right now, as Isho is a threat on this 8 Dawn turn. So we're playing around that effect, and we have to make sure we don't take our 2 life to go up to 6 to lose those cards.
yeah, so definitely want to prioritize not having to discard 2 random cards from hand, and let's see if he can apply, the Lucci player can apply cards to the board in order to play around that. Alternatively, he could try to deal with this Krieg by dumping some Dawn into it. We'll just see what he wants to do. And it looked like he was significantly ahead, the Lucci player was, because he was at 5, but this Krieg just flipping the script on the matchup quite
It definitely
effectively.
does that, yeah.
So
I think we're always equipping one there, either if we're attacking or defending, so I think that makes sense. Going equal probably means the Krieg isn't going to die, and that's just a sign of we're trying to get cards out of hand.
yeah, so the Lucci player actually taking a page from the Kinemon and using a bit of a starving strategy, attacking the Krieg instead of the life here as well. So a good back and forth, and, you know, control-y type matchup from both of these players. And I want to believe that the Lucci player, if he believes that he's the controlling player in the matchup, does have some of those 8 and 10 drops, and that's probably what he's leveraging by saying, okay, I'll deal with the board right now, and then just play one of those powerful threats later on. So the Kinemon player also having very good late game as well. So it wouldn't surprise me if the Kinemon player actually believes that he has the advantage in the late game, just as the Lucci player does. We'll see which one of them is right in the end.
Yeah. It looks like we have double Fukuru in hand as an option here from the Lucci side. Something to block up the way, make sure this Krieg will never get through, even if Yamato comes to tap stuff down. And Borsalino Fukuru is about the same, just slightly different.
Yeah, so playing an oversaturation of blockers here is very good because the Kinemon player running low on cards in hand maybe only has 1 effective tap down effect to use on this turn, and then the other blocker that's still standing will absorb the Krieg attack. So good to play 2 blockers here.
Yeah, we did see Izo pitch last turn as a counter out to, on the Krieg, so probably have less of those effects even still.
So here we very pivotal. Where does this Krieg attack go, and when does he sequence it during the course of the turn? Important also, does he now try to change the strategy and attack the Bluno? I guess it doesn't matter. It's going to get blocked either way.
Yeah, I think Krieg's always getting blocked, unfortunately.
And this Yamato is going to either attack Bluno or the life to get a little bit of value. If we attach a Dawn or not, it's going to indicate what sort of threats we have in hand. Kinemon player heavily prioritizing life on the last turn did indicate that he thought he had a commanding position. I do want to see some sort of a bomb from his side this turn, but attaching 3 Dawn to the leader indicates that he might just have another Yamato or something like this.
Looks like we're considering the option of just letting the Blue No die, getting a Fukuro back, but the Yamato would be able to swing on it. Probably make that pretty awkward.
Does absorb 2 attacks here, so just contemplating how much pressure the Lucci player wants to have moving into the following turn. He just decides to go ahead and fix his hand a little bit with the Khalifa effect. And we do see, I believe, another Krieg might be played on this turn for the Kinemon, so just...
That would be a lot of threat, and then I like not attacking life for that reason, because now the double attacks can threaten taking both cards every time they attack.
You know, that's very good. So leaving this Yamato available for something like the final hit, and then leaving 2 life on the side of the Lucci player so that these double attack Kriegs can go ahead and take both of those at the same time and then do all in either with the leader or the Yamato. So definitely expecting something like that to occur. And having an insurance policy Krieg gets rid of Khalifa, and also if this one Krieg dies, the second one will try to clean up the game. So
we did see Krieg discard Krieg, so we were a bit flooded on that one there.
Not a bad card to flood, especially in a matchup like this.
Correct, yeah.
Controlling the field and also just attacking for double attack. Double attack, a very pesky effect, especially for Rob Lucci, trying to calculate how many attacks he has to absorb versus how many attacks he can take. Krieg making it so that he has to basically block every single attack. And
we see the resources running out of hand from the Kinemon side now coming into effect as Krieg does have to fall.
And this is one, I guess, hurdle that the Lucci player has to get over is how does he apply maximum pressure now that he has relative semblance of control over the field. Still having to deal with this second Krieg, but he has to find a way to block that while also trying to apply pressure to the Kinemon to try to end this game.
Looks like we're 5 coming in at life, so yeah, we'll probably take that, add some cards back to hand.
And the role of each player in this matchup have been quite modular. At first, you know, the Rob Lucci player deciding to be a little bit of the defensive player, and now understanding that because he was put down to 2 life so early in the game, he has to switch his game plan a little bit and then start being more aggressive, as we can see here, attacking with his 3K. So just understanding that a role in the matchup can switch at any time and then trying to play to his win conditions.
Looks like we are coming in with double attack. That'll be 2K over each of the blockers there. And Bluno's going to come in with Khalifa coming back yet again.
Yeah, so this Bluno defensive threat just turning out to be so efficient. Being able to get rid of... Oh, we see 2 Sakazukis drawn. Definitely a lot of no counter cards in hand. So this Khalifa effect proving to be very powerful here. Just fixing the hand as much as possible, just to have as many 2Ks and 1Ks as the Lucci player can.
Yeah, I think we're far past the point where Isho's going to be available, and Kuzan is fine, but you can hold 2 Sakazukis as an insurance policy. You can pitch one to the other if need be.
So even with these 4 cycled cards from the Khalifas, the Rob Lucci player does look like he has 2, maybe even 3 no counter cards in his hand. So let's see how many of these attacks he does actually opt to take versus defend. We can see a 2K and another Fukuru blocker, so
I would be afraid of an Odin coming down this turn. We've left 8 Dawn back, which definitely represents that type of threat. I would be fearful that we would need to close the game a bit quicker, so I don't know if we'll need the body to attack back here or not.
Yeah, and Kinemon not necessarily being able to take advantage of his cost reduction effect in this game, simply because the Rob Lucci player has been prioritizing a little bit of attacking life instead of board, but that not slowing him down at having access to the full 8 Dawn. Could see something like an Odin, like you mentioned, come down this turn, and keeping up tempo even through all these blockers has been quite good from the side of Kinemon.
So we're going to block, pitch a 2K, get out of that one.
And if he doesn't have... Oh, so I did catch a glimpse of a pink card, and everybody's favorite 8 drop is that color scheme. So definitely deciding if he actually wants to play right now. I would assume he does. It looks quite good on this battlefield. What other options does he have? Oh, so he decides to flip instead. So
sure. We could pick up Yamato. I don't think the effect would be too good, but yeah, I think just passing.
And then choosing not. So he's prioritizing defense. And what do you think this is? Does he feel like he's under that much duress moving into the following turn?
I think the only thing that I could really think would be a reason to hold up Dawn is for Punk Gibson, right? Punk
Yeah.
Gibson can tap this entire board, really stop the pressure that's coming in. And Law is also a good attacker as well as a blocker. So I think just protecting the Krieg and playing a little keep away might be the plan here. If it's not, we might lose this Krieg, and that will probably collapse most of what we have going on here.
Yeah, so there's something to be said about even if you end up having 0 counter power in the hand from the side of the Kinemon player, playing something like an Odin in a turn does ensure that you have a safe way to attack for the last 2 life and try to do an all-in on the following turn, because even if it's smoke and mirrors, you did have a couple of cards in hand. The opponent didn't know what they were. Maybe it could be some counter power that they play around, try to overcommit on this Krieg, but now that you haven't developed this sort of Odin threat, and even a Pump Gibson will not presumably save this Krieg on the turn. So let's see if this sort of defensive line from the side of the Kinemon actually pays off for him.
See an attack for 6 here. Probably considering getting this attack in before something would die on the turn for a Lucci effect. Because it looks like we are considering the Sakazuki on the Law.
So yeah, playing Law on the previous turn allows these Sakazukis to get extra value, deciding on whether or not he wants to activate the leader effect to get even more aggressive, make this a 2-turn clock on the game, and not having this Odin play again. If this Krieg falls, there's not going to be any sort of a counter attack, try to go for an all-in on the following turn for the Kinemon player, and it's just a consequence of wanting to be defensive, wanting to leave as many options moving into the Lucci player's turn as possible, but maybe just saying, okay, I'm going to try to fake that I have some amount of counter power in my hand, just slam the Odin on the table, and then hope that it survives the turn cycle might have rendered a better result for the Kinmon player. Just sometimes playing to your out is, and playing to win is objectively better than playing to not lose and, playing overly defensive. So,
Well, I think the Punk Gibson's actually quite good here, right?
Yeah.
If Lucci untaps, we'd be at 9k for the attack. 9k onto the 7k Krieg would not kill it if we have Punk Gibson and though it tapped on the blocker. We could come in with Krieg for the double attack and then come in with a large Kinemon attack to try and finish the game. So this line could work if we opt to do the Rob Lucci ability, but instead seems like we do a safer play, with the Fukuru and just say go. We have our wall up.
So definitely a key moment in the game there. I also agree with you. I would have liked to see something like an untap effect from Lucci just to increase the tempo here, really say, okay, I'm going for a game on the following turn. He might still be able to do that, and at the same time, he's decided to apply, maximum shields up with this Borsalino and this Fukuru. So we'll see which player actually decides to go for the all-in first. And, Kinemon just having to attack with Krieg every turn. This Krieg has taken at least 2 blockers, and now we see the Odin in play with the cost reduction and with shields up with 2 Dawn. So definitely a great turn from the side of the Kinemon. His patience definitely paying off here.
Yeah. Now Punk Gibson again threatening to tap down the blocker, and I'm sure we're running out of blockers on the Lucci side. I know we run a lot of them, but I'm sure we're running out here.
Yeah, so the Kinemon's play, betting that the Krieg was going to survive the turn cycle if he left Dawn open, and it did, and at the same time he got an extra turn to develop this Odin, so everything worked out as planned for the Kinemon player, and just expert level understanding of the game state and understanding that he wasn't in too terrible of a position if he went over and played that Law, forced out the Zakasuki, forced the Lucci player to sort of tap down his resources, and then understanding that the Krieg would survive if he did that. So a very great play, understanding tempo from the side of Kinemon.
It looks like we're considering options with Lucci, and I don't know that we have much more options besides try and kill the Krieg, try and attack our opponent, and get down to probably about 1 life would be the spot where I'd feel safe.
So he is, like you mentioned, running out of blockers, and blockers would have been the only thing that would have allowed him to sort of race in this situation, maybe just attack the life a couple of times. These 3 life from the side of the Kinemon player, if they are something like an oversaturation of combo, and it's very believable that it could be because we haven't seen that much combo power from the Kinemon player yet, so just a lot of defense could be in that life, and I don't know if the Rob Lucci player can actually punch through all that, so deciding instead to take down the Krieg would be wise.
I think something from the Rob Lucci side that could have also changed the state of this game is when we fixed our hand with Khalifa when we pitched to our Sakazuki. We pitched a lot of Kuzans, and we still have this Sakazuki in hand, the second one that we drew.
Yeah.
And that one isn't really doing anything on the board, and the Kuzans could be drawing you cards deeper to find more blockers, to find more time, or to find shockwaves for counter power.
Yeah, I agree that Kuzan could give you extra options. We will see if the second Sakazuki just comes down as an eligible attacker. 7K, definitely a respectable body. Nothing to pop, but good Dawn efficiency if the Rob Lucci player needs an attacker. Alternatively, I believe the last card in his hand, other than that, is a 2K, so he might honestly just have to go face on this turn, try to survive on the way back, but I don't know if he has enough blockers to do that.
Looks like we're coming in for 5K on the leader there.
Okay, so this attack actually very powerful. Understanding that the opponent only having 2 cards in hand, one of them most likely having no counter power, forcing out a Pump Gibson with your 3K attacker is just a very solid play from the side of Lucci. And if he did go ahead and Pump Gibson on that, we could try to craft some sort of an all-in on this turn. So definitely like this attack from the side of Lucci.
Yep, and it looks like we did take that one, and now Lucci is considering how can we get down to at least one more life here. 3 cards in hand. We could decide that the Sakazuki could go to life, but I like that on the Krieg. I think we need to make sure that our life is going to be protected here. If our opponent has a Yamato or an Izo to tap down our last blocker in Borsellino, we are going to be attacked, and we're going to be attacked a lot.
It could just be the fact that the Lucci player has said, okay, I might not get a turn cycle on the way back, so I have to go for game here, but I have to invest as little as possible in these opening attacks just to play around Pump Gibson as much as possible. Gibson not being played here. We haven't caught a glimpse of his hand. He's keeping it on the mat right now, so we don't exactly know what he got from his life, but if he only had 1 counter, then the Rob Lucci player could actually get through on this turn.
I think if Punk Gibson would have been the card from life, we would have seen the trigger happen, probably tap the Sakazuki or tap the Borsellino. Both options probably would be fine.
And here, going in for 5. Previous 5s having to be defended with a 2K. This might indicate that this attack might go through, and if this goes through, then the Rob Lucci player could try to go for game here. So
definitely. I think you still have to protect this one, unfortunately, which does mean the Krieg will likely die.
Okay, so
Yeah.
another 2K. So that is the one card that we didn't know about before, and it being a 2K counter card might change Rob Lucci's turn here. So now he can default to dealing with this Krieg, like you mentioned earlier, while having the Kingdom 1 player at only 1 card in hand. Very unlikely that it's a tap-down effect, hopefully. And this Borsellino can try to save us on the following turn. So let's see if he goes ahead and deals with this Krieg, and he does. There you go.
Yep. Playing around Punk Gibson with the attack, but I think if Punk Gibson's still in hand, that we're not surviving the turn anyways with the Odin attacks. So
Yeah, so definitely on that leader swing being defended by the 2K, he could probably read that Gibson was not available. It was a very good time to Gibson at that point. So either way, just using his Dawn as he doesn't have anything else to develop.
Sure.
Goes ahead and gets rid of the Krieg. And can the Kingdom 1 player, this is most likely the final turn, unless he has something like blocker in clear field, but I'll see how he decides to play it.
yeah, I mean, if we can't get through the blocker that's on the battlefield, this last Borsellino, that does mean that we're probably going to have to attack the board a little bit.
Yeah.
There's no way that we're going to be able to break through on just these 3 attacks by any means. So if we don't have that tap ability, then yeah, it's going to be Odin swings on Sakazuki type effects.
Going on to Khalifa, it looked like. Just
That's probably 5K at face just to threaten, but it could be 5K on Khalifa. I don't think you can block this one ever with the Borsellino either.
something like blocking here with the Borsellino would allow the Kingdom 1 player to, have some shots at lethal. And dealing with the board. Okay, so just determining that maybe he is not winning on this exact turn, and his main game plan might just be to force out the Borsellino block just to, take off as much pressure from the board as possible. And he can actually do that pretty effectively with this 2-attack Odin.
Yeah, the only problem with attacking the Khalifa first is that the Borsellino is not forced to now chump block the Odin. You could
That's
take
true.
the life. But okay, it was attacking the Sakazuki. Yeah, that makes much more sense, I think, then.
Yeah, so now we're going to see if this Odin is going to restand and attack life. I would actually much prefer for a second Odin to be played here. That'll most definitely secure the lethal on the way back, but it does leave us in a situation where we have 0 cards in hand. So just keeping cards in hand a little better, deciding that
Sending
the
a message
3K
to that
was
brand new, yeah.
that 3K was very threatening, as you can see. And then if the 2 Dawn made the Lucci player play around Gibson on the previous turn, just leaving it up so that he plays around this turn as well. He's seen that sort of sequence from the Lucci player. So even though he doesn't have it, he leaves up the possibility of it being in life. So doesn't hurt to have that 2 Dawn available here. And we're going to see if the Lucci player, this game has lasted quite a few more turns that I had originally predicted. And that's just a consequence of the Lucci player, playing a little bit more defensive, understanding that he does have to get some of these attacks in, but he doesn't want to leave himself susceptible to, those Kriegs that were previously in the game. But now he has to deal with this Odin. And what's so good about this Odin is that attacking for 8 with 0 Dawn investment makes other characters in play very efficient to attack. So just trying to navigate this turn, see if he can craft a sort of end game right now. And
I think it's difficult to craft an endgame. Even if you kill the Odin, you'll see a new Kiku come out of it, and that's also a good blocker. We can play at a way to make you block with the Toki. Yes, thank you. But I think that's our path to victory, and we just have to make sure we have another blocker in hand of some sort.
Yeah, so I agree with you 100%. Like you mentioned, just all-inning from this point forward is probably the Rob Lucci player's strategy, as this Odin just has complete control over the field, cleaning up the entire board last turn and then threatening lethal all on its own. So the moment that card came down, the Rob Lucci player
going on the 1 life does mean that it's going to be a struggle from the Kinemon side, because we're still not finishing the game unless we find a blocker, find a tapper for the blocker.
Yeah.
We still need to get through the Borsellino that's in the way. So allowing that life to happen means that if our opponent is able to commit like 2 bodies to the board here, that they'll be able to threaten lethal on future turns here.
Yeah, and the entire game has been that sort of game of blockers on both sides. Blockers very efficient from the Kinemon side, and blockers very efficiently from the Lucci side. So it's definitely looking like whoever has more of those key word cards has the advantage in this case. And so far, it has felt like it's been the Lucci player. However, the Kinemon player has had blockers plus threats in the side of the Odin, for example, and has forced out a lot more blocks from the side of Lucci. So.
Okay, so yeah, we do see that one.
So the Sakazuki coming down, taking care of the Toki presumably, and it does not. It actually just comes down as a blank, leaving the Toki open and deciding, okay, we're not going to try to go for game this turn. It's going to definitely be on the following turn, leaving this Borsellino to try to stop the Odin. And here it is. Like you mentioned, the Kinemon player going down to 1 life on that previous turn definitely makes this the final turn for him, you would presume. So trying to go for game is his objective here, and let's see if the 7K can be defended. If not, then definitely this Borsellino is going to get forced out over the next couple of attacks.
Yeah, it all depends if we're able to deal with the Toki on the other side. If we're not, then chumping with the Borsellino isn't so great here, because we'll lose that to an Odin attack here.
Yeah, so actually if Borsellino blocks here and doesn't get protected, do we see something like Odin attack, and Toki attack maybe? I don't know.
I don't know that we'll see a Toki attack, but
I don't know. That would be quite the funny attack.
That would be.
Just how much does the Kinemon player prioritize ending the game on this very turn? No, and this block actually makes it so that he doesn't have to necessarily. Oh, and this Bonnie, huge top deck. If this gets some sort of a law blocker, for example, then we can see him insulate a lot of pressure. And Killer works just fine. Going to be able to block this all in from the side of the Lucci player and also draw a card. So actually one of the best options he could have found possible in that sense.
Looks like we restand the Odin attack in, get you down to 1 life, and
playing the Killer with the 1 Dawn. So a great find from that Bonnie. Bonnie always getting those efficient blockers. And can the Lucci end it on this turn? So like we mentioned before, this is all a consequence of that early block with the Borsellino. That made it so that the Kinemon player felt less pressure to end the game on that turn, and then went ahead and just controlled the field instead, did 1 chip damage, and then set up blockers. So expert play from the Kinemon player on that turn, and we'll see if the Lucci can just convert a victory. It's looking a little difficult through 2 blockers, so...
Yeah, I think Lucci was relying on what looks like a Kobe in hand to break through 1 blocker and come in for the last 2. But not having 2 ways to deal with blockers is the problematic thing here.
So here, Bonnie just proving instrumental, finding that killer, and then killer, best option possible in order to block and draw a card, just to keep up as many defenses as possible. So great late game find here for the Kinemon player, and it might just be good enough to get him through the finish line here. So we're going to see this culminating turn from the Rob Lucci player. He feels like he is so close, just 1 life on the other side, but these blockers have been the name of the game from the beginning, and right now just proving critical.
Yep, just trying to portion out the correct amount of Dawn they consider to be the correct attack here. I don't think it matters all too much. I think if you go in for about 7k, that you're going to get a block most every single time with the killer. Drawing a card's just too good to pass up.
Yeah, so with the inability to end the game this turn, presumably, and also the inability to deal with this Odin on the other side, the game should be over on the following turn cycle. Taking this
just taking it.
Yep, understanding his position, there can't be 2 pop effects, presumably from the side of the Rablucci player.
Sure,
if there are not enough attack to get through, so he just goes ahead and takes the life instead.
The problem with taking the first one and not countering out of that one, I think, or blocking with that one rather, is that now we can attack bigger later on.
So going ahead and having 7 Dawn left, I wonder what his plan is now that the Kinemon player has actually taken the last life, because these 2 blockers are so problematic.
So we can equip 3 for play 3 for Kobe, leave with 4 left. We would swing in for what looks like 9 and 10 then as the last 2, and our opponent would just have to get out of 9 to be able to block 1. And I think you want to play it now and get rid of the killer so we're not drawing a card.
Yeah, so giving him an extra card with that killer could prove fatal. So I agree with you. Definitely sequencing it to where the destruction effect would be played right now.
So we're recounting again, making sure. Equipping up to 8.
Just being very careful with how he sequences it. And actually, he is given the opportunity to get that extra card with the killer. So, you know, choosing to attack first, seeing if the killer gets him out of this, goes ahead and picks up another killer with killer. And now, like you mentioned, the Kobe comes down. Going to pop the Toki, and will that be just enough?
Well, we'll be able to attack for, looks like 9k then. So I guess it comes out to the same, actually, in this exact instance.
And we actually see from before, if that Odin didn't conduct a second attack on the life, the Raplucci player would not have had enough cards in hand to actually pitch for the leader effect. So that extra additional card in hand from the attack might be the key difference here. Is it going to be enough to get through? And it's not.
Boy.
Okay, so he ends up playing a blocker instead. And is this going to be enough?
Yeah, just noting that we do have a 3-minute extension time here as a feature match area. So even though they're calling time and overtime is flashing, we do have time still in the round.
Definitely a grind game here. One of the better matchups, mid-range versus control. Always exciting to see. And this Bonnie, will it find another blocker? How many blockers can the Kinemon player produce? Can he just go for game this turn?
I think he just goes for game, right? I think we just attack with the Odin, force a block, and then attack with the Kinemon.
Because, I mean, at this point, I feel like it could have been a game a few times, but they have chosen to be a little bit more defensive on each side every time. So seeing who actually ends up pulling the trigger in the end, and it does look to be the Kinemon player.
And I think that's the problem with the small attack there, is that, your opponent was able to counter out now. And Kinemon can attack twice, but we'll be able to block one of those. So we can try and equip the Bonnie up, I guess, to go to a 5k attack, and that is what we're opting for.
Okay, so this attack, quite good from the Bonnie. either forcing out the block or just taking the last life, and it's going to be a take, and
Yeah.
it should be lethal in play, as we see here.
Yeah.
So 9-9 will, with one card in hand, end it all. Oh, by exactsies and everything.
Oh,
Wow.
wow. So
Very
close.
crazy.
Wow.
Incredibly close game. And okay, yeah, so definitely.
All right. Yep. Shuffling up. It looks like we did take the mulligan from the Newgate side, and as well as the Katakuri side.
So that sort of stall strategy from the side of the yellow players in the new game matchup used to be quite popular when the 9-drop was actually, at higher numbers than 1. Newgate, in this sort of state where some of the cards have been restricted, tends to be a little bit more aggressive. So we'll see if that actually ends up coming up in the sense that Karakuri might change his game plan from that sort of super hyper control stall strategy into a more like trade blow for blow onto the field. So I definitely want to see what the Karakuri player in particular does in the matchup.
Right. Does look like we're getting a slight correction in the life there. You do have to place each life down individually, with the first one being the bottom of the life. And now that's corrected. It looks like we're good to go.
Yeah, definitely incredibly important for everything to be neatly placed, especially from the side of the yellow player, as they tend to oversaturate with trigger effects. So just setting everything up as cleanly as possible, getting all the life on stream.
And looks like we're all set and ready to go. We're going to see who's going to be going first here. Definitely want Newgate to go second if you're Newgate, and Katakuri to go second if you're Katakuri. So we'll see who gets the nice little start boost here.
Yeah, and it's always good, like you mentioned, to go second with the yellow decks in particular, because your 8 and 10 drop turns are very powerful. In this matchup in particular, the 10 drop doesn't end up being that critical, and most of the time it's just a heal 1. However, now with the addition of the 5K, the 5 drop 7K Yamato, the
Yes.
tongue twister, it's actually not too terrible to go first with yellow. But in this case, he does end up having to go second, and the Newgate player ends up burning a life on turn 1. So do like to see that from the side of the Karakuri player.
Yeah, and Newgate did start with what would arguably be one of the worst searchers in just Whitebeard parties, not being able to add a body to the field, and then the Ezos that possibly could come down.
Yeah, so no early game matching this pudding. This pudding going ahead and getting a 6K body, even if it doesn't end up having rush, just a nicely statted attacker going into this 6K Newgate. So good pickup there from the side of Karakuri. And
Yeah,
Newgate
you definitely want the bodies in this matchup. You're going to want to contest back on some of their bodies, but you also need to attack up a lot of times into that Newgate. So making sure you have things that are at least 6K are quite important.
So very critical. This first life is no trigger, no early game pressure from the side of the Karakuri for free, and then actually a relatively weaker turn from the side of the Newgate player, playing a searcher into a blocker instead of something like a 6K 4 drop that is more typical. So suboptimal search into suboptimal board from the side of the Newgate player. You gotta play with the cards you're dealt. Probably a very overly defensive hand if we get to see it at some point. And from the side of the yellow player, we see a Thunderbolt maybe will be important later on, not important right now. And we'll get to develop. Looks like a smoothie. So let's just see how he wants to approach this. A little bit difficult getting through the 6K body from the Newgate.
Yeah, you want to try and put the body on the battlefield this turn. It's the main goal here. So playing the Rush Katakuri is definitely an option. If we had Pero Sparrow, I'd like to see that plus an attack for 7K just to start pressuring from hand. But it does look like we don't have that option, and instead this Rush Katakuri is going to come in without Rush, unfortunately, because our opponent is taking their own life.
Yeah, so definitely a boon to be able to play 8 drops and 10 drops on curve when you go second. But we see the detriment here not being able to, for example, if you had gone first on 5 Dawn, play this 4 drop and then attach an attack for 7. So definitely a merit to going first versus second. Second, in this case, having to be a little bit more defensive, developing, but not attacking the Newgate player. And that's just a consequence of the Newgate being 6K.
And I like this a lot here. This attack with the Luffy is a lot of pressure on the category side. And also, we have this faucet of backup to block in the way of it. So it most likely will live another round as well. And when we're coming down with ace again next turn, attacking with the Katakuri is actually pretty costly because we're going to lose that then.
The Karakuri player deciding to take an attacks for 6, like you mentioned in the early game, a little bit pesky, and no 2K being invested there is a little interesting, you know, deciding not to play toward some of those mega late game scenarios, taking that life in the early game. So we'll see if
Okay.
that comes back to bite him. It might not, because the new game player, if you get to deal with his board in the early game, isn't too terribly aggressive other than playing the 9-drop.
Right.
So
Yep. And it does look like we are going to take the block here with the Fasa. Get that out of the way. Come in for 8 again. And I think if you can protect this, you just do.
So you would actually discard for this Luffy here, and I agree with you. I think that having this Luffy as a sort of counter attack, even if it eats up your hand in the early game here, these attacks 4/6 on to the Karakuri character card are very important. So I would defend it if able. And it might be a little awkward. Maybe he's considering pitching 2/2Ks. He might not have a 1K option. If not, this choice would be much easier. And yeah, that's what it ends up being. So a large investment, definitely worth thinking about there, but I think that he is going to be rewarded by being able to attack with this Luffy at least one more time.
Yeah.
And this, oh, and that is why he actually saved it. Now he gets to out-tempo his opponent completely. This Luffy will take care of the Karakuri character card that's been reduced by 3K, and then 2 other eligible attackers in the new gate and the port gas ace, and that card is just so broken.
It's very good. We'll probably see the sovereignty on this one here. Not going to get too much better, I don't think. Plus, you don't want to hold the Dawn up in future turns, especially if you're trying to 8-drop Katakuri or something next turn.
So the 8-drop would be quite good on this field, but at the same time, if, like we mentioned before, if he taps out completely to play something on curve, he does not have access to the leader effect going to base 7K and swing it back as something like this Luffy. And we get to see defending this Luffy, like you mentioned before, incredibly critical, because it gets to attack last turn on that character card that got reduced by 3K, and at the same time, if an 8-drop comes down, it won't be dealt with this turn either. So
Looks
to
like,
see
I think that's a Speed Jill I saw there on top, so not too bad. Fine to leave that on top.
any amount of counter power, definitely good for the new gate player. He'll get to see that on the following turn, but for right now, does he defend the Luffy one more time? I mean, it served him quite well so far. Defend your friends if you can. And
I think if you let this one die, 8-drop Katakuri does come down and pretty much clear this board completely. But looks like we're safe there. Oh, tapping the Dawn for the attack, I see. Cost it out of 8K. Okay, sure.
yeah, and actually, a decent play from the side of the Karakuri player, going to 7K base, trying to force out another 2K from the side of the new gate player. The new gate player not wanting to give him that resource at the current moment, or maybe not even have it available to him. And what this allows you to do is play the 7-cost character and get value out of it while you still can, because as we know, if the new gate player goes down to 0 life, no burn effects work on him anymore. So
For sure.
definitely a good window to resolve that 7-drop effect. And
We did see a heal out of the 7-drop, which is quite interesting to me. That means that we're at least expecting probably 2 more turns.
this could also indicate, if the new gate player decided not to burn himself in that scenario, he could have access to the 9-drop in hand, because going down to 0 life on this turn would be a little awkward for that 9-drop, but being able to take 1 on the following turn, defend a little bit, and then 9-dropping would be very good. So either on this turn or the following turn. So it could indicate some line of play involving the 9-drop here.
That is very true. Oh, and Cracker from Life does threaten a bit here, doesn't it?
Yeah, so just another card to be able to chip damage the new gate's hand. New gate definitely comfortable if at a large hand size, but
So we counter out of that, okay?
so over defending his board, just doesn't want to go down too low, as the threat of these aces is quite real. Another one being represented here, but let's see which bomb Newgate decides to go with. If he does have an ace, he has a good amount of attacks on this turn. Plus, oh, okay, so he goes a little slower, doing Thatch plus a blocker. This is very good.
Sure.
So that blocker is going to insulate against this base 8K attacker on the other side. And at the same time, this Thatch, if he has something like Thatch into ace, his next turn is going to be incredibly powerful, either attacking life or clearing board. So what does he do here? I mean, defending his life at 2 there might indicate a 10-drop on this turn.
I think 10 drop would be quite good here. I know that Newgate's going to take this life on the next turn anyways, but this at least stops 9 drops if that was possible.
Yeah,
if they draw for turn.
Getting maximum value out of the burn effect on the previous turn, and if 10 drop comes down here this turn, we do get to see it's actually a 7 drop, not the 10 drop like we believed previously. But either way, he can still get a lot of value to this. Now, this is a very good consideration, and this will also indicate if the 9 drop is available. If he burns the last life, it might actually be a little scary to burn the last one because the Karakuri can still attack for 8. This base 8k mom can still attack as well, so a lot of pressure if he chooses to burn. So it might be a heal perspective here.
Yeah, if you do burn, that means your opponent's going to life. If you don't burn, that means they're attacking the ace. So one way or another, you have to establish which thing am I okay losing here.
And is the Newgate player is in complete control of where these attacks go on this turn? And yeah, like you mentioned, the ace is probably going to be the priority target here, and that was pivotal in the sense that did the Newgate player want to make this game a race, or did he want to sort of make it a field control game? And here, forcing the Karakuri player to attack the ace, if he decides to, does make the second ace very good on the way back. So,
and I think you're going to be happy with this play if the card in hand that you want to play next turn is ace as well. You can ace, bring down 2 of those attackers that just attacked in, kill them off, and then now we're in a bit of a space where I'm a little bit ahead on board again.
Yeah, so it's going to be pivotal whether a 9 drop or another secondary ace come down on the following turn. If Newgate has access to either of those, while also being able to keep this blocker in play as well, he'll be in a pretty commanding position. Now, he has the option to also save this ace, and potentials for, lethal on the following turn could be possible, but instead he goes ahead and protects it with blocker. So I do suspect that Karakuri is going to try and deal with this ace unless there's some events that the Karakuri wants to leave available.
I think an attack for
7 base?
Yeah, 7 base is fine, but you're probably just going to get a speed Jill. You could test for a 2k, but...
Yeah, so he saw that speed Jill earlier and chose it there as well. Like you mentioned... Oh, so he's actually just gifting him the life here, just playing around the 9 drop. This will be the final determinant if he defends this. Definitely 9 drops coming down next turn. But
I think this is awkward in the face of ace again, like we said. Now the ace can get 2 things, whereas if you just went with a bigger attack on the ace, try to get a 2k out, then it feels a bit better and you're not exposing this cracker, which could be an attacker on a future turn.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you. He gave a little bit of extra value to those 1Ks that were revealed earlier, and at the same time made his crackers susceptible. So agree with you 100%. Leaving it up and going for something like a more of an all-in on the ace, and just having the Newgate burn himself for the last life seemed more optimal. As things stand right now, the ace survives the turn cycle. The thatch play on the previous turn pays off as it's now untapped and threatening some of these cards in play. And like we've mentioned the entire time, is it something like a lethal angle from the side of the Newgate player, or does he go for board control? I want to believe that, something doing both. Doing something like maybe threatening this cracker and then attacking face with the rest of the cards could be a nice line of play. In either case, taking resources from the Karakuri player is the main goal this turn.
I think you attack like that because it does seem, because we protected this last life as Newgate, it does seem like 9 drop is going to be the play this turn.
Yeah.
So because of that, I think you can be a little bit aggressive here, threaten the face, threaten counters out that way.
Yeah, and making this game a full-on race is actually something that the Newgate player definitely wants to do if that 9 drop is available. And there he is. We've been speaking about him the entire game, and the Newgate player has been kind of telegraphing that it is available from previously, so just commanding the board. The moment that card comes down, it seems a little difficult from there.
Yeah. Cards aren't restricted when you find them every game, so.
And here, the only, I guess, awkward part was the first attack with that ace. Now there is a target in play to attack that is lower than 8k. But either way, getting the value out of that attack and then just letting it perish on the way back doesn't seem that terrible, as it already got the one attack value. And from what we can see here, this 8k attack probably just trying to tax some resources on
And it looks like it does very much tax the resources.
And so 3 blocks of highly prioritizing keeping that last life and to see if any of these attacks go through. I mean, a wide board is not good against the 9-drop Newgate as it makes your leader base 8k, and these attacks are very suboptimal. Attaching 3 Dawn to make an eligible attacker is not what you want to be doing in this game state.
Yeah.
So.
I think if there's 2 lines of thought here on countering out on that last attack. I think we either take it and let the Cracker swing up and try and finish the game this turn, even though we're really swinging up, or we establish that, okay, we're going to be able to play something like an 8-drop, buy back some board, and protect ourselves very hard on this future turn. 3 cards is very costly and shows your opponent just kind of what your hand looks like at this point now. And it's going to be a little scary.
So I agree with you in the sense that if you block that one attack, this turn might not be the lethal turn for the Karakuri player. And with that said, he's going to dump as much Dawn as he feels comfortable in order to deal. I think he pointed out the ace here. And
at the ace would be interesting. I think you can probably clear it, but are you going to be able to fix on 3 attacks next turn with what seems to be 1 card in hand, 2 cards in hand?
It also is interesting how he decides to assign all his Dawn for the turn, because definitely any kind of all-in with 1 Dawn open from the center of the Newgate, he can just get out of with a guard point or a Radical Beam. So forcing the event out on this turn is decent, but I don't know if he's going to be able to actually get rid of any of these threats. And with only 1 card in hand, it's looking dire to survive in the following turn, especially since that 9-drop Newgate cuts off any sort of smaller blockers. So
I think if you have enough counter power to save this, and that was towards life, not the ace. Okay, sure.
Okay, so this is just an all-in angle from the side of Karakuri. He's determined that he's probably just not surviving, not clearing anything on the field if he attacks field, and not surviving if he just passes turn. So just saying, okay, these 2 attacks, 412. It's looking like.
So the first one would have been 412 there, and the second one's probably just going to be a large swing with the other 8-drop, because anything else is going to be swinging up.
And I can't imagine the Newgate player is going to perish to an attack like this. I mean, one event represented with that 1 Dawn, and just something like a guard point sort of skips this entire attack's effectiveness altogether. So I just, it's a difficult position
for the
Karakuri. Sure. I don't think he can deal with any card on the field other than this ace, and that might not be good enough. So just seeing what he does with his final Dawn.
It could be something like, we know our last life. It could be a Brûlée also, and we could play that way. But no, it looks like we're stacking up. We're going for the big swing.
Yeah, so
14 coming in?
It is.
6K over. So what do we have? We have the Radical Beam.
Yeah,
cards aren't restricted. That's right. Puts him up to 12. Need a 2K and a 1K.
And shows him.
That looks like enough.
The requisite amount, and I do believe surviving on the following turn is not going to be too likely, but we'll just see the Newgate player go through the motions. I mean, just a masterclass of one-ofs in that game.
Yeah, for sure.
To be honest, definitely did very well to play toward that 9-drop, scripted the game in a fashion to where that 9-drop was going to be incredibly backbreaking and effective, and it was. And at the same time, showing the prowess in defending the Luffy in the early game, I think was quite pivotal.
Right.
That Luffy got a lot of value before going down, and then as well as knowing when to slow down the game a little bit and just play Thatch. So incredibly well played from the side of the Newgate, just understanding how to control tempo in each of the turns and showing off that he had more than enough defense. So well played. The players are just about ready to get started. Just a couple of quick announcements, and then they're going to present and begin the game. So
anybody who watched the stream yesterday saw us stream a couple side events there. We had a chopper event, and I believe Kuro here is the same Kuro from that event that got second. Very exciting, and he was quite a good player with the Kuro yesterday, so we'll see if we can continue that up today.
So typically players who pick these sort of underrepresented leaders for major events like this one are technical masters of those strategies, and we'll get to see this Kuro sort of show his prowess and his practice on it.
Yeah, I haven't played a lot of Kuro myself, but I know that you're trying to prey on a lot of those aggressive red decks, make sure they get those tap effects and you can punish that effect. I'm not sure how that plays against Doflamingo exactly. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, so definitely known as a defensive strategy that opts to farm a lot of the aggressive red decks in the field. typically in a round like this, not expecting to find something like a Doflamingo, but being paired up against it, he should, I would hope, have a plan against Doflamingo, it being one of the more powerful strategies in the set 3 meta. Uh, Winner of an event a few weeks ago, so he should have a plan for it. And at the same time, I want to see exactly how aggressive the Kuro deck can be. We know that it can be super safe, but can it actually put up damage in the mid game? And you know, see what happens there. So, first question for the matchup: is he going to open up one drop? He did. So, firing on all cylinders for the Doflamingo.
We're going to look at 5 and hopefully stack them on top in a way that is favorable in the future with these Doflamingo attacks.
So we see a couple of hits there. We also see another setup Perona. You know, probably going to be third or fifth card just to make sure to get another stack going afterward. And I suspect one of the key ways that this matchup is going to play out is the Doflamingo player is going to be high on life total during the latter portions of the game, and then playing something like removal spells. Mihawk, for example, comes to mind if he's on that sort of a strategy. Alternatively, he just keeps flooding the board with these one-cost large characters like Jinbei. So
We did see Kuro miss on turn 2, not be having a Nami in hand, but it does look like their first life instead gives us a Nami effect. So,
so a good constellation prize here.
yeah.
And going ahead and getting a 2K.
Yep.
That is also a trigger. And having characters in play for the Kuro leader ability in a matchup like this is quite important. We'll see if he actually wants to prioritize dealing with this Jinbei. I would suppose that he wants to prioritize just dealing with any character that the Doflamingo player plays in general that's tapped down. Being able to effectively not have to use his tap down effects, and at the same time, does the Doflamingo player want to overcommit on saving the Jinbei? It could deal with the Nami, but he goes ahead and does in fact do it. And
Yep, and we see a Geen here. Taps on the Perona, and that can be an attack in. Save that for later.
And a good attack here from the Nami, because this Nami can at any point just be tucked under because of the Jinbei in place. So just using it aggressively instead, and then getting a little bit of extra value with it. So
Yep, we still know the top of the deck, so this should be an attack in with the Doflamingo to flip something off the top. We're going to see what that is.
and he went
Gecko
ahead
Moria,
and that
sure.
Gecko Moria going to get that card he defended with previously. Just a good sequence of events for the Doflamingo altogether, and we know that at some point he's gonna have another Perona to make another nice stack. And
I think the only scary thing here is now we're going into a 6-on turn with the Kuro. That is a perfect amount for Krieg to come down and
Yeah.
eat up the rest of the board that Doflamingo has here. So if Krieg is in hand, I think it's going to be pretty scary.
we saw Krieg actually be incredibly influential in dealing with a lot of the life from the other side of the opponent very quickly. We saw in the Kinemon deck, the Krieg was able to apply massive amounts of pressure there. And in this matchup, actually, even more centered around enabling that Krieg to attack multiple times. So definitely, Kuro wants to see Krieg on curve here, and that'll be very important for him. Dealing with these 5Ks is proving a little difficult. Only attacks for even on both of them. They get defended, and now they can attack pretty reliably on the way back. So,
And there's the Krieg coming down to rip apart this board.
and there you go. Like you mentioned, just defending both of those now lets Krieg get maximum value out of his effect.
Jinbei has nothing there, and we are going into a turn where I believe we have drawing the last card we know about on top of the deck for the Doflamingo.
Yeah, so essentially the Doflamingo player there saying pretty much, okay, I'm going to defend these two, discard 2 1Ks, and then force you to discard a card in order to deal with them with the Krieg effect, and also force you to have a Krieg altogether on curve. And it goes ahead and plays out in that way, just showing that the Doflamingo player wants to tax a little bit of the Kuro player's plays, not have them have too many cards moving into this mid game. So
Does look like I saw maybe a Kuma and a Gecko Moria in the stack there, so I think that'll go right back on top in an order that is favorable.
And the Doflamingo player most likely going to prioritize getting this Gina off the field, and at the same time playing a card from the top of their deck, holding up some sort of defensive card. A little bit awkward in the Dawn situation. This turn is you know, a cleanup turn basically. Not going to be too incredibly powerful, but once he gets into those 9 and 10 Dawn turns, we can start to see bombs. But for right now, he just wants to clear up as much of the board as possible.
8 life, trigger effects.
Okay, it's like 8 in pay 1 to add a Gecko Moria. Adding back the
Moria
2K.
is just so valuable
Yeah,
in these scenarios.
definitely represents a decent amount of card advantage plus tempo.
And we're going to see here if he holds up 2 Dawn representing something like a Love Beam or any other defensive type of card. This Krieg's effectiveness might go down significantly, and I do like that sort of defensive posturing from the side of Doflamingo. Even if he doesn't have an event, it's still something that the green player might consider playing around.
Yeah, especially with the Krieg that you want to try and really make sure hits your opponent. Now they're going to have to commit even harder to that attack if that's something they really want to prioritize.
One thing that could occur here, and it'll be interesting to see how many blockers the Doflamingo player can actually produce moving forward, but one thing that could happen is, depending on how many are available, the Krieg could actually be allowed to connect once, if not twice. It could be a little bit dangerous, but it would refuel the Doflamingo's hand quite significantly. So making sure not to take the chip damage, it's looking like, oh, he does take a 5 here. So
9 to life, double strike.
taking a 5, maybe baiting this attack from the Krieg for what I believe is 9 right now.
I believe it is 9.
He
And
actually
we are
opts to
taking
take it,
both.
so
All right. In one turn, our life has been halved very quickly.
same exact situation with our previous round, and same exact situation with the second Krieg as well. So green players heavily prioritizing, you know, highlighting Krieg in their strategies, and it's going to fruition here. It's pretty good on this
Yeah.
field, I'll be honest.
Yeah, Doflamingo adding things tapped to the field is now proving as a very large cost to the ability that previously was just a nuisance, not quite as obnoxious.
So typically, it's pretty detrimental overall for Doflamingo's cards to, you know, be played tapped. He makes up for that with the card advantage that he gets to accrue, but in this matchup in particular, cards being able to be popped while tapped is proving to be a little awkward, and we're going to see
Yep.
Mihawk, as alluded to before, picking any Krieg, it doesn't matter which one.
Nope.
The other one can't be dealt with right now, and what makes this so awkward is lethal possibilities are very likely on this turn.
Yeah, if your opponent thought you had a level beam last turn and you didn't use it, or you do have one that's not in hand, or that is in hand right now, it's going to be awkward as not a counter.
Yeah, so no events available for the Doflamingo player, and I would be surprised if the Kuro player doesn't seem pressed to actually try to end the game on this turn. This is the one turn window where your board couldn't be dealt with too effectively. The 9-drop only being able to deal with one of the Kriegs, and I think he's going to use his advantage.
Yeah, this looks like a Django attack right here. It looks like a giant attack. I'm coming in. Django's going to untap, and I'll get a couple extra small 5K attacks along the way.
And what makes this so favorable is the fact that once this attack, oh, and he just shows the hand, he knows he's not going to be able. He is defeated in play with just these attacks. If the
No, I think
Django
that was a
comes through.
counter out of that one.
Yeah, so the Django
Yeah.
goes ahead and might seal the deal here. Actually, yeah, like
Yeah,
you
he
mentioned,
countered out of
he was
it,
just
yeah.
countering out of it.
It's just
It
all
looked like he
1Ks.
was conceding just because he threw it all, but it's actually just he needed that many cards to survive.
And he's
So-
alive. He did survive the turn.
Okay, so
No cards in hand, but did survive.
so here trying to clean up play as much as possible, but it's still just going to be this Django and the leader. Even if everything gets dealt with, those two are going to be eligible attackers on the way back. So
Yeah.
it's looking dire for the Doflamingo. Like we mentioned earlier, having to discard what 6,
Yeah.
7 cards in order to survive that attack.
That's
So-
a lot of cards.
and then still
we're-
taking the chip damage from the other 2 5Ks on the turn. So
I think we're hoping for something like Tuboa Hancocks and try and clear some of the board out of the way.
yeah, so like you mentioned, dealing 9 into the 7 Krieg, and then hoping that that is good enough to get rid of it, and then just shielding up with a few blockers. He doesn't overcommit to defending it. It's already done its job.
Yeah,
He wants
for
to
sure.
keep some tappers in hand, presumably. And if he let the 7K go, he might let Gin go. He might protect it.
There's the
Just
2K we
getting
knew about
rid of an
earlier.
extra 2K. And what can he possibly produce here?
Okay,
Oh,
3,000
there you go.
worlds. Tuck the Django. And it
And a
is
blocker.
okay. It is a blocker.
Fair
So-
enough. Yeah.
You're still dead, but
But
put
he
up the
did
best
his
fight you could have.
best,
Yeah.
And you get to see the tremendous tempo power of the Kuro leader. So
Yeah, he had another
just tapping on the blocker, and then 2 attacks is going to be just enough. He could have done it in many different ways. It didn't
Oh, yeah.
really matter too much. But that 1 attack
There we go.
turn with Krieg into untapped Krieg swing again, that was incredibly
Yeah,
powerful.
for sure. Let's jump back over.
What do we do? But no, so like you mentioned earlier, actually one-ofs is going to be the name of the game here. So definitely any of the players that can get a consistent access to the 9-drop is pretty important. And then obviously the Marco blocker is going to be quite pivotal as well because it can recur over the course of the game. So stopping all-ins going to be really pivotal when both players are down to 0 life. So.
Another important factor in this matchup, unfortunately, is just who's going first.
Yeah.
Going first does cost a lot. You're going to lose that first life quicker, and you'll be down to that lower amount of life that your opponent can try and pressure onto you, I think.
Another key feature of the mirror is that both of you are actually 6K, so you can, in fact, force out chump damage in the early game, and we're going to see how much priority players give to attacking for 6K versus 8K, and do they defend life versus not defending life. So all of this is going to be put to the test. I'm sure that neither of them have ever played against the mirror before, so it's going to be an exciting time for them as well.
I think this one favors the alt-art, right? Alt-art's more powerful, I think.
If you want to, root for the underdog, obviously don't root for the alternate art, but if you want the alternate art to be rewarded for his looking niceness, then you can go ahead and do that. But actually, the alternate art is, like you mentioned, going first, so he is at a slight deficit just off of taking life on the first turn. But Izo into Marco getting his perfect curve. Now we get to see what he does on the awkward 3-Dawn turn. So that's going to be quite an important turn. But other than that, starting out quite well overall.
Looks like we're going 2 here for a Fossa. Interesting. You know your opponent just added Marco, so you're going to have to use that on one of the, probably the next turn here to block in the way, which is fine. It's a play to do for the turn. But you don't want to hang that out for the Marco in the future turn to be able to chomp on.
And interestingly enough, like you're mentioning, going to have to use the Fossa as quickly as possible before the Marco tags it. But in this case, 3-Dawn turns are notably quite suboptimal for the Whitebeards if they don't play something like Nico Robin. And because of that, the Whitebeards incentivized to just swing, and not using the Fossa was actually surprising. I thought that the whole point of playing it on 2 is that you can go ahead and insulate your life total a little bit against this Marco that's coming up next. But going ahead, swinging using Frankie. So being able to curve out perfectly with 4-Dawn turn being much better than 3-Dawn. But now being the first one to feel the Marco and getting rid of that blocker again, I just feel like that block should have happened on the previous turn.
A little bit of value loss, but not too bad as we attack in here. Still equal on life as we're losing them at an equal rate.
I think definitely being able to attack on the previous turn was good, and now being able to swing with the 6K and fielding the first Marco is going to make it so that he's a little bit ahead of tempo just off of obviously being the one that got to go first. But we're going to see this counter attack from the side of the non-full art Newgate, and it's going to be quite good because something like a Thatch here would be very, very powerful, being base 8 going into the latter portions of this game.
Definitely. Yeah, being able to just swing above such a large amount already is quite powerful. Looks like we're just totaling up whether we should be defending life or not.
And this Frankie just way more susceptible to pressure than the Marco. Of course, the Marco having many different ways of saving itself in combat, the Frankie only being able to be guarded for. But even still, the Frankie getting in there, a 6 being taken, going down to 0 as early as the 5-Dawn turn. So it might just be how the mirror match works. And then
an amount of aggression, I think, is important in the mirror match.
Yeah.
I think if you're not playing 9-drop, no reason to protect your life. Just go down to 0. You're both going to be swinging haymakers the entire time. So who can get there faster and do it right?
Yeah, and this is going to be an important turn. I do want to see this Frankie absorbing a little bit of pressure from the side of the full art Newgate, because attacking this one life, if one's game plan is to go down to 0 life, the other one inevitably probably is as well. And attacking this one life is just a loss of an attack value altogether. So I do want to see Frankie go down if possible this turn.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Frankie just represents a body, and your opponent will defend that a lot more than they would the Newgate on the battlefield, and you really just care about getting cards out of hand at this point.
Another
We'll go 6 on 1.
consideration for the full art Newgate is, do we attack for 8Ks on this turn? No, nothing like a guard point available. Oh, and now he might actually just think about all-inning with as much Dawn as possible while also leaving up a blocker, and this is a really good opportunity for the 6K Marco to get in there, as there's no events available for the Newgate. So all of this Dawn can convert into card advantage.
I don't know if the all-in pays off a whole lot. There's large stacks of hands here, and even if you could counter out for what would be 17 total or something, you can't use events to get there, so it has to be purely just discarding cards. I think you can do a countermeasure. Yeah, do a quite large attack, force cards out of the hand, and you can play something like the Fossa hold up guard point. I think feels a bit safer, and you'll have about the same clock.
Yeah, so definitely, like you mentioned here, just a big enough attack to take as many resources as possible, make it a little bit awkward needing multiple 2Ks and a 1K, and then at the same time representing a defensive option in the Fossa and holding up an event. So getting the best of both worlds does the full art Newgate player, and also has a clear lane to both defend his Marco or his life and at the same time try to all-in on the following turn. So definitely patience, like you mentioned, will pay off for him if he gets to survive this turn.
So now it'll be a bit of portioning of the Dawn, figuring out how we're supposed to attack this. The Fossa does make it a little awkward. You don't want to go all in quite, but it does look like Marco's going to come in and take care of the Fossa instead.
So the Marco guarantees two things. It guarantees that the Fossa is no longer there, so the attacks are a little bit more effective, but at the same time, it also guarantees that the full art Newgate is going to survive the turn. This damage is only going to be chip damage, which all chip damage counts. And it's looking like hands are dwindling from both sides, but it does feel like the full art Newgate is a little bit ahead in this race, unless the Statch has anything to say about it.
I think it's a pretty easy guard point out. Yep. Looks like they've passed the turn. Leaving 3 up can hold up things like Red Hawk, Guard Point, Rad Beam.
And the 2-drop blocker is actually proving instrumental in these mirror matches. That card has looked really good from both sides. Even if it takes a Marco to pop it, that's still 5 Dawn investment from the other side. So it
Absolutely.
does stop an all-in potential from one side of the field. So they're just proving to be very good. The only card that it loses to is the 9-drop, but neither player had access to it this game. So 2-drop blockers being quite good here.
I think now is the time where you start counting your opponent's cards in hand and say, what is the correct amount that I can really try and pressure you for? If it seems possible that you could swing in for what would be 16 plus 6, 22 total, yeah, then if you have the possibility to get out of that, then I should probably play a little bit more defensive here. Make sure I leave up Dawn for events, make sure I'm able to get out of the attack back.
And we see this pattern, same pattern from last turn, doing enough of a large attack to where you force an awkward situation from the opponent's hand, while at the same time having both events and blockers available if possible. So good hedging of the bets from the side of the full art Newgate player, and these attacks are going to start taking a toll. I mean, they've already taken a couple of 2Ks and a 1K, and now a Red Hawk from the other side. So the attacks are slowly getting through there. And I do like this from the full art Newgate, just choosing to make this a battle of attrition, knowing that he has a larger hand size and he was the first one to actually attack directly. And now here comes that 2-drop blocker again, just being so good in this scenario.
Yeah, seeing that Fossa again, really just able to jump right in the way is so powerful. So it looks like we have about 5 cards from the hand of regular Art Newgate there. So this will have to be a turn. We're going to try and close the game out. I don't think we're going to be able to prolong this game through another turn at all. So time to really consider what our options might be on attacking through.
Yeah, and I do agree with you. The Newgate player on the right does feel very pressed to end the game on this turn. It's very daunting with so many cards in hand, and knowing that a few of them have to be 2K counters, so it just has to spread out his Dawn in a way where he most effectively taxes those from the opponent's hand, but it's just looking a little dire because, again, he has not had that much access to blockers over the course of this game. So
yep, I think this will be 4 pretty equal attacks here, so long as they're slightly over the amount of counter power from events exactly.
So 2 attacks chip in first. This one, good argument to either block or use a Red Hawk on. Either way is fine. And then going to probably split off the 2 6K attacks with some amount of Dawn in each of them, and then hope to see if that gets there. We do see an efficient block there with a 2K and a 1K. That's a good sign from the full art Newgate side. And
I did see a Nami in the hand from the regular art full art, or the regular art Newgate. Is there something that we could possibly search to help save us here?
there could be a chopper. I mean, you could plan to not win the game this turn. Continue to chip damage a little bit. Maybe try to bait attack the Marco into not being revived and alleviate that sort of a pressure. And then try to see if you find something like a chopper on the way back. If Fosha's good, then chopper is just as good.
Looks like we're searching here. I see a Sanji as an ad, but that looks like the only card that could possibly be added.
Yeah.
So you do improve your counter power, but again, with 5 cards in hand, it seems difficult to be able to really protect yourself going forward.
Don't think, unless he has a large amount of events, and we only saw 1 guard point at most, if I saw correctly. So now he knows that he did not get access to that blocker, and I would be surprised if something like an all-in, a failed all-in, is happening here. But he has to try his best to try to end the game here. Alternatively, he just tries to survive, but something tells me that the full art Newgate will probably be able to close it out if turn passes here. So making sure he counts the Dawn, just distributes it. Oh, and here some sort of a chip attack, so forcing out a 1K from the hand. Okay. That attack indicates that for sure, unless something gets rid of the blocker in the way, this will not be the last turn.
I think I see 5-drop Marco in hand, so the option could be to bring that down and then just use the rest of the Dawn leader swing. But again, that's just difficult.
It's basically just hoping that an attack with 3 additional Dawn is good enough, and that might just be the best he can do in a situation like this.
Yep, and that is the case. Asa blown up. And yep, just attack for 10. Do you have it?
Hope it's enough, and we do see the bad news here.
Yeah, Red Hawk plus anything.
Yep, anything ends up being game here, so the players recognize it, just going through the motions now. And again, it just looks like okay. Pretty fast forward there.
Yep, there we go.
We do
Players
have it there,
are
so
done with that.
just overall, the full art Newgate having, I feel like, the tools and the understanding that if he absorbs as many large attacks as possible without having to use his hand size, he's going to be advantage in that way, and he was, and he did. So
Okay, yeah, let's jump over.
been playing Law at my locals for a little bit now, and I really enjoyed it. It's a fun deck. It has some of the more unique combos in the game, so I'm looking forward to see what this Law player can do.
Definitely. For anybody that might have watched Three Swords Productions coverage of Arlington, this Law player is Nikki, who we featured in the top 4 of that, playing Law with Dogura.
Oh, yeah?
And it was very cool. Going first was actually a benefit. You played Dogura, you played the extra stuff out. Got a lot more going on.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of the Chef. I play him at 2 in my deck also, so I'm glad that he's playing it as well.
Yeah.
Dogura being a lot more prevalent now that you don't really need to have a 6K base. You know, Whitebeard is still played at heavy amounts, but much less so after the nerfs to the leader and access to the cards that he has. So definitely like the Chef instead in order to out-tempo your flips earlier in the game. So
definitely.
I enjoy that he's doing that as well.
I don't know if that's his list today, but that definitely was in set 2, so we'll see if he's kept the list together. Looks like Zoro's starting off going first, leading off with a Whitebeard Pirates finding Izo. Classic combo to keep churning through your deck.
Yeah, and then specifically in Zoro, depending on the build that they play, the most typical build for it is the Whitebeard, heavy package with the 1-ofs. And Izo obviously helps you find those more consistently, so good that he picked that card up.
From the Law side, we saw Brook come down. Brook is a solid card in the Law deck, definitely. Not one you're trying to lead on immediately. You prefer to see at the Dawn, prefer to see a Nami type effect. But Brook will definitely get you up to that limit of 5 characters if necessary.
And always overemphasizing how the players want to approach that matchup as early as turn 1. Zoro deciding not to try to starve Law in the first few turns, deciding instead to outrace the Law. And I do like that plan. I always feel under duress whenever the Zoro players start chipping in for 5 multiple times. Jet Pistol really, really good. After you flip into that 5-drop Law, Jet Pistol can get rid of it quite easily. So all the tools that the Zoro player needs seem to be coming together, and it's going to be up to Law to be able to put up some bonies, put up some flipping, and as early as next turn, so to be able to keep up with the Zoro.
Looks like we're considering what options could possibly come out of the hand here. I saw, I think, a Jewelry Bonnie and a Rush Zoro at least flip by.
So Rush Zoro, incredibly important for the Law player in specific because he can, obviously, with the 5-drop Law, loop the attacks and then try to race the Zoro, so good that he has that option there for him. And then obviously the Bonnie being the most important tool in the deck, being able to recycle that is critically important.
This the Dawn looks like it's going to probably add a Chopper here. Decent blocker for the match, but also something to add to your board in the meantime.
Chopper actually super important at allowing you to take the early aggression from the Zoro player, maybe going down to 1 or 0 life with Law, and then being able to summon a few different blockers at the same time, essentially acting as 1 more life. So very good that he was able to pick up that there.
We do see the starter Nami also out of the Law deck. That one was very popular set 2, trying to fight against the Whitebeard Tide, but here it's fallen off a little bit as Whitebeard, has gotten a number of nerfs with the restrictions.
Really like the subtle sequencing that the Law player had. He was able to swing for 5 at first, checking the 5th life from the Zoro, making sure that it wasn't something that could destroy the Chopper, some sort of event card that he could use for free, and then actually playing the Dawn Nami, knowing that the Zoro is going to take the life regardless of whether it's a 5k or 6k, so good sequencing from the side of the Law there.
We did see not an event, but instead a Marco come down and be able to eat the Dawn. I think that's a really heads-up play to go for the thing that might possibly be bounced back to hand, searching again in the future to find more card advantage, and instead stranding you with just things that are good effects that you can get back to your hand, not the powerful card advantage that you have.
Exactly, and it's very important to take care of the 1-drop blockers through attacking and then destroy with effects the cards that you mentioned can get more cards, like the Curly Dan, like the several other searchers that Law plays. It's very important to not heavily prioritize popping the blockers, especially not in the early game, because instead you try to stop the engine from Law and the recursion value that Law can get. So tagging the Curly Dan there was very good.
We do see Brook come down, and it looks like this other Brook might start attacking in. Probably noting that this Brook will be then bounced back to hand, adding a 2k as an option for the future. And it does look like we countered out of that attack. Okay, Jewelry Bonnie came down.
And a very good tempo play, being able to play Gordon for Gordon and then, or Brook, sorry, Brook on Brook attacking and then using Jewelry Bonnie and most likely recycling some of these cards with the leader effect.
Jewelry Bonnie did miss, looked at 5 cards that were not supernovas. That is unfortunate.
Surprising.
If we do have a Law here, though, we can pick up the Jewelry Bonnie and save that from being lost here. Quite important.
And I made this critical error, and my logo's not recycling the Bonnie in this exact position. Different cards, but same principle. Getting back the Bonnie is critically important because it is one of the only cards that gives you access to more flips into the 5-drop Law. So very good discipline in picking it up here.
Definitely. Looks like we're going back to the Zoro side here. We've cemented a decent board already. Let's see if we can get this into an advantage in the actual life total of the Law player. Double blocker will have to be worked through, so definitely noting that here.
So for Zoro, being the aggressor, number of attacks is going to be critically important here. We want Zoro to attack for 5 as many times as possible, and getting rid of this Law blocker first will let you do that without giving you extra value. So I would enjoy something like another Marco here with the Gordon in combination to deal with this 3k Law.
Definitely.
Alternatively, just making it 3k is good enough to be able to swing for 5k and not giving the Law blocker extra value. So even if he doesn't end up dealing with it by the end of this turn, it's still decent in order to apply pressure, so that's fine.
Yeah, and all these 5s do come in pretty heavy to a Law player. You need all the cards in your hand to be resources that you can leverage on the battlefield. You can't really go too low in life, otherwise the big swings start coming in. And you can usually block with one of the blockers in the battlefield, but blocking with all of them takes you down too low for your limit of characters that you need there.
Yeah, and it's like you mentioned, Law is a deck that relies heavily on a critical mass of cards, and also each individual card has a specific purpose. And if you start tearing through a few of those cards, forcing the Law player to block with those key cards, like, for example, Otama's, if you force out a Bonnie with a 5k attack, like things like this, then they could run out of ways to flip and do combos. So definitely aggression very important here.
Okay, we did see 7 come in, and Vista is the one that's going to clean up, not a Marco, but all good, still the same.
Yeah, so the Zoro player definitely telegraphing that Vista there, only leaving up 3 for it, and then 1 for a floating Izo. Finding a 1 of here would be kind of nice. If not, just finding some more,
Yeah.
a Jozu or another Marco, that is fine
Yep.
as well.
Yeah, Marco can definitely run rampant on these boards, so we're seeing that so far with the Marco plus Vista.
Zoro indicating that he does feel like he has a significant amount of tempo advantage because he did opt for another Marco instead of something like more counter power like that Jozu. So it just indicates to me that his hand is probably quite strong and he just wanted to add more threats to it. So quite powerful there. And on the way back, Law gets to untap with a good amount of Dawn and almost a full field. So this turn is actually going to be quite powerful from his side. And he does not whiff this time. He does find the 5-drop Law.
He finds 2 of them. He finds the starter one plus the blocker law. So now you have options even. Both could be good. Notably, the starter law can untap your Bonnie. You can either try Ghost Searching again, or you can leave it untapped so that it's not able to be attacked necessarily. But the blocker one obviously is also strong, adds a blocker to the field, changes out the battlefield in a way that might be favorable to you, especially with this Zoro in hand that we know about.
And then we get to see what you highlighted earlier coming to fruition. So he actually doesn't have too critical of a flip target in the red color. So he gets to recycle, for example, this Brook, but that didn't create him any extra value other than an attack, right? If it had been something like that Curly Dan that was tagged earlier in the game, he would be able to loop Curly Dan essentially and get a lot more of these choppers or other Makinos 1-drops. But because the Zoro player had that insight to be able to destroy the Curly Dan earlier, the Law player can only flip these Brooks, and Brook is okay, good as a defensive tool, but not that sort of looping value that the Law wants to see. So
I do like using it to threaten when you're ahead. Using that extra 2 rested Dawn to add into a leader attack or something is quite nice. But when we're kind of on the back foot, yeah, it's not exactly what you're looking for. It's pressure, but it's not pressure in the way you need.
we see Veg to complete the 5 characters, brings back Brook to protect it after it swung, and then goes ahead and plays that Rosoro that we saw earlier in the game. And it'd be interesting to see what the target for this attack is. It can't be buggy. I mean, it could be, but it would be quite suboptimal. So I would say something like be racing the Zoro by attacking face.
I think so. I think you have to play towards face a little bit here. Your opponent probably will have to squander some resources in what is on the battlefield in the first place. So just let them do that, and we'll figure out a plan.
And the reason why the Zoro player would be incentivized to guard this attack as opposed to, feeling comfortable going to 2 is because, like you mentioned before, that starter deck Law can produce 2 7k attackers at some point during the course of this game. So the Law player can produce lethal from many different situations. So just making sure you mitigate as many 5k attack as possible is good for the Zoro player. But it does tax Amakino from his hand, and at the same time he does end up taking that 3rd life through the leader swing. So could indicate that Zoro actually not having that much counter power in hand right now. But
Okay. So it did look like we had a trigger there. Looked at the card, put it back down for a second, checked our hand. Unsure what the exact details of that would be, but
so if it was something like a Fire Fist, maybe he wants to combo Fire Fist with Gordon in order to get rid of this 5-drop Law blocker. Maybe he was considering that he doesn't have enough resources to be able to pitch for that Fire Fist, but at the same time the Fire Fist being able to kill 2 separate character cards is
Definitely.
quite powerful. So maybe that's what he was debating there.
I see. That makes sense. We did see the Nami at the end of the turn swing in on the buggy there to take that out, so got rid of that one on the way out.
Good sequencing here, using Izo to try to force a chump block if the Law player wants to defend that 1-drop Nami. He declines. Not a very good spot to fight for that there. And now it does seem like he has Gordon Firefist, and I am curious if he's going to prioritize dealing with the attacker in 3-drop Zoro or some of the blockers and then apply pressure. So ideally he would like to destroy the blockers and then attack the Zoro through combat. So
I think that's the favorable way to go here. if the Zoro is left almost by itself, quote unquote, then I think it's okay. We're still at 2 life. We still have resources, and my opponent's going to have a tough time utilizing that attack. Generally, when we're talking about using starter law, it's about putting in starter law for only 2 Dawn, not 5.
Yeah.
So it's a bit different there when you're actually paying the full cost to do so.
And then here we're going to see what event card he is going to discard to the Fire Fist that inevitably will be played here. Alternatively, it could just be something as simple as a jet pistol, but then he wouldn't have had to Gordon it. So, or it could be that Marco that we saw previously. So he has a lot of different options available to him. How much does he want to commit to dealing with this board versus holding up counter power?
This is the attack for 5 coming in. Still noting that Gordon was used on the Law in the first place, so Law is not free blocking here.
Yeah, so that Law is not an effective blocker at this point in time. That's why these chip attacks for 5k are so efficient. And now an attack here for 7k might force one of these 1-drop blockers into the fray, but Zoro player considering there are no lethal possibilities as there's not enough attacks to get through both the blockers and the 1 life remaining, but he could find a situation where he actually gets rid of the entire Law's field on this turn and then just tries to go for game on the next turn, so it does seem to be in a very commanding position.
Looks like we've taken the last life there, so everything that now comes through must either be countered out or blocked in some fashion.
And this is the second game now in this tournament where we've seen Gordon be a highlight standout card. Gordon, you know, being used to board control all these 6k threats from multiple different opponents, and just here being able to deal with both the 5-drop Laws that were played this game. I mean, Gordon has just been a highlight for Zoro players.
Yeah, and I think the Fire Fist coming down was expected, but great. And I do want to note that taking out the red character was slightly, ever so slightly more important. As you know, your opponent already has Jewelry Wani in hand to be able to flicker out for red characters. So now you're turning off green if that was an option for them.
And one of the better top decks for the Law player right now would be something like Curly Dan or Nami, or Curly Dan into Nami. Would it be the most ideal? Just filling up the board with all those red characters that he's missing. And there's Nami. So step 1 of the puzzle pieces that he needs to fulfill, and something like a Zoro to counterattack. So everything coming together to try and do some sort of a counter offensive here. We're just going to have to see if he has enough Dawn to pull off everything that he wants to do on this turn. He definitely has a lot of resources available to him. We also see a Rush Luffy in the corner of the hand too. Maybe that can try to go for game at some point in the future. But for right now, he has to survive this onslaught of character cards on the Zoro's board. If he actually does clear most of Zoro's board on this turn, he still has to deal with these Marco's heavy pressure for 7k. So
yeah, with a total of 8 gone left, I think I like starting with the Zoro, swinging in for 5, judging where we're at with this attack.
depending on the number of cards in hand and how strong he feels the opponent's cards are, he would choose life to try to go for an all-in versus board. I do like going for board here. It's just a lot more efficient in terms of what you want to do. You find veg, so that actually insulates having no life total. Now he has, at least at the end of the turn, going to have 2 veggies, maybe even 1 more blocker if he has another 5-drop Law, and that would be good enough to convert a turn here.
Okay. And now we have the ability to use the leader ability. What are we optioning to put in? I think I see Luffy as an option still, or we
third
do
Law,
have it.
there we go. And I believe he found that from the life because we hadn't seen it yet, and that is a fantastic play here. He has 3 blockers in place, so being at 0 life doesn't affect him as much, and he can pretty effectively swing over these 2 3k attackers that swung him last turn, and he also gets to hold up something like Represent Radical Beam, maybe if players are on something like that for right now. So clearing the board and playing 3 blockers. Law's turn could not have been any better. 4 blockers.
Yeah, sure. We're replacing. We're getting that out of here.
And this is the best point here. You go Buggy into Diable Jamble. That would be
that would be a way
quite
to
fantastic.
Yeah, Diable Jambe. All right. What do we have in the hand to work with? Looks like Gordon, Jozu. Is that a Fire Fist?
It might also be a Fiery Doll.
Oh, it could be a Fiery Doll. You are
interestingly
true.
enough. So
Not quite as effective here.
Not as effective here, and at the same time, not that many rush characters available to him. Also, no removal. Just stuck with another Gordon. Gordon has been fantastic so far this game, but not exactly
Yeah.
a third copy, not what he needs right now. So trying to get through this wall. I don't think he was expecting the law player to find this many blockers. I mean, he probably was expecting one more, two more, a worst case scenario, but having 4 extra life essentially with these blockers is probably something he did not expect on this turn.
That does look like a Marco at the beginning of the hand there now. So you could Gordon, Marco, take out the law. That's at least a big body gone. You've still got an onslaught of small blockers to deal with, but yes.
And these veggies, even though they are great defensively, they do not, force damage through, right? So the law player is still going to have to close out the game as early as next turn, one would think. So if this 5-drop law is dealt with, how does the law player put up lethal? I mean, he definitely seems like he has to as early as next turn. So I want to see something like that starter deck law work with the Zoro.
Sure. Well, we've got 7 coming into the Zoro. I think we're either. I think we're going to block it. I think that's the option to us at this point. You're going to need the attackers to try and finish the game. You're kind of hoping that your opponent doesn't have something like a Marco or Vista to clear this blocker law, and just trying to really get your attacks where you can.
So for the Zoro, trying to force out as many natural blocks as possible so that this removal in terms of Marco is as efficient as possible. But this Zoro basically has to survive the turn cycle, so all these attacks are essentially lethal. And forcing Vegas to block. I mean, this one contemplating pitching the rest of his hand instead of blocking. And I mean, honestly, it feels like it'd be fine to do so if he doesn't expect something like a chopper to come down, because that Marco could tag a chopper when he's trying to go for game, the law player.
I think the Marco's going to come down this turn. I think the Marco will likely eat the law. If the law somehow eats an early demise prior to that by blocking, then we'll eat up AJ instead, and I think that's just fine.
Yeah, so we'll see. He invested the first veg, so I'd be surprised to see if he didn't invest this second veg to defend, and he does. Okay, so that's pretty good.
So we got 5 coming in for the Marco. Yep, the law was expecting that one. Okay.
Okay.
We do have the Luffy in hand. Will it be enough to try and close this game?
So something like a full field into bounce into making a Luffy might be one way to go for game. Alternatively, just attack 7/7, 7 maybe.
Yeah, 7/7/7 doesn't feel great, huh? Especially when your opponent has left 2 Dawn back.
He could try to make a full board and then flip into some of these Mark Surviving cards, but I think his hand is a little clunky right now. He does have the 4th 5-drop law and that Luffy, so I don't think he is actually able to fill up the full field. He might have that Bonnie from earlier, but I don't know how much Bonnie can actually do in this scenario.
Yeah, you used all your Supernova's blockers, I believe, at this point, with your last law in hand. But that is a blocker. Can we string together blocker, blocker, blocker? I don't believe we have that option to us.
He can go for something like deal with the Marco in play, make a second blocker somehow, and then survive the turn cycle. That could be another possibility.
That is a possibility. This fiery doll is suddenly now online, though, which is upsetting when you kill the Marco.
And the law player not panicking, understanding that he is under a lot of duress, but he can survive the next turn as well if nothing crazy happens.
And he looks like he just let that go. Fiery doll was more important in hand.
Yeah. Interesting that, I mean, Fiery Doll doesn't seem like it has that much more effectiveness other than to absorb another attack from the leader law. So interesting that he chose to keep it there. Oh, he could be playing around something like a jet pistol. So if he goes ahead and gets his second Marco jet pistol, he can actually defend that one instead. So maybe leveraging against that.
It is possible. I've seen an odd one-of sometimes in these law lists for jet pistols. Okay, we see 2K out.
So even if the law player sets up a 5-drop law in order to attack with this Zoro again, the 5-drop law is going to get forced to block. So it's not going to count as an eligible attacker, and Zoro's still at 2 life. And there we see the starter deck Law. Will he actually choose that over another Bonnie? Interesting.
I think you take the Bonnie. I think they're both 1Ks at this point.
Yeah.
I think you're playing the blocker Law pretty much every time.
So here, does he play something? We've already seen all the veggies, but does he play something like Killer as well in order to be able to search it with the Bonnie? That could also be another
that
blocker
could be an
option.
opportunity.
And here he's contemplating, very important choice. If he does go for the line of play where he floods the board with multiple Bonnies, he could actually try to survive the next turn with Bonnies in play and then use those Bonnies to fill up his hand and try to go for game on the following. So that's also a line of play he could do. Bonnie is essentially a free use if you're trying to fill up the board and then use your leader effect.
Right.
So, heavily contemplating. Good turn to just take your time, take a deep breath, understand what the scenario is fully and how you can use every card to try to absorb these next 2 attacks from the Zoro. And what are the Zoro's outs from here? Obviously, all the rushers are quite good in this position. And the Law player just debating here.
I think another line option is you could take Jewelry Bonnie, play Jewelry Bonnie, tap it, hope to find something like another Jewelry Bonnie, play and tap that, and then you can play Blocker Law with all the Bonnies still out, use all of that effect instead of paying just 5 for the Law.
Yeah, exactly. And we see that he
opted
to just cast it,
yeah, you just paid the 5, untap the Zoro. Do you attack with the Zoro? And I think you have to.
I think you have to in order to make it a 2-turn clock, right? And then at the same time, I did like your approach to getting Bonnie with Bonnie and trying to do a flip effect, but instead he guarantees just playing it for 5 and then having the body out in case he whiffs on getting any key card. So he went for a conservative line, and blocker Marco picked up actually on the other side.
Blocker Marco. If unable to kill my opponent this turn, Blocker Marco will make it difficult.
Yeah, so now does that change his perspective? I mean, he definitely had to go for game on this turn before seeing that Blocker Marco. Does that Blocker Marco incentivize some sort of a slower game plan?
I don't think so. I think you still have that Rush Luffy. I think you can either try and bypass that, or you can try and just do some small attacks and make them take it that way.
Yeah, and it's probably on the Zoro player's mind that the Law player can have something like a 5-drop Luffy, so that might also be another incentive to try to go for game here, but he just doesn't have enough attackers, it seems.
I think you need to go towards life. I think you just have to force this Law to be chumped in some fashion. I don't think there's really another way out of this in hand.
And this is one of the first times that the Zoro player kind of taking a little bit of a deep breath, taking some time to go through the motions of this turn, because he does feel like the game felt super secure earlier in the turns, but now it could slip away from him if he doesn't produce efficient attacks on this turn. So just taking a little bit of extra time, considering his options, understanding what this Marco in particular has to do. Where does it have to attack? Also debating how to use the cards in his hand. His last 3 top decks have not been that cooperative, but this Blocker Marco that they picked up could be influential. So
really taking a breath.
Difficult. Debating.
I'm not envious. Believe me.
And where does the Marco end up going?
It was like 8 at Zoro. Zoro's going to be protected pretty much the same as the Law, I think, at this point.
Yeah, at this point, that Zoro and the Law are one and the same. Goes ahead and lets it go. 7K. This one does feel like this next attack could be at leader.
I think you need this to be big. I think you need
Most
the Law.
definitely 8K is a good safe number.
Yeah.
And if he has something to defend this with, it would be incredibly good. If not, you probably don't block it, because honestly you're trying to play around something like a Rush Zoro.
Yeah.
So a block here seems unadvisable. So this Zoro might be going down unless there's 2 2Ks available.
So we know
the
from the
hand.
Law side that we've picked up Bonnie previously.
Yeah.
So on the Zoro side, we know they're either pitching their entire hand to save this,
Yeah.
or that will like block with Law plus do something else. And I like what Zoro's done here, where they've left they've done a sizable attack to make the Law awkward, but they've left 5 Dawn back, representing both Luffy and Zoro that can come down with Rush and threaten your hand. So you can't really pitch your entire hand out here because then you'll just lose.
Lose, yeah. And it's good, like you're mentioning, even though the Zoro player's hand is not actually that effective, he is representing, something like that 5-drop or 3-drop rush. So definitely using all his advantages in order to force this block, or at least feel like it's a forced block from the side of the Law. So heavy debate here. These late game scenarios in these sort of aggro mid-ranging matchups are very pivotal, and they just want to make sure they make the right
Zoro
choice.
does go down. Now we have the Marco down, the blocker Marco we had seen previously. And unbeknownst to the Zoro player, there is still one more rusher in the Law hand. We know that Luffy is still hanging out.
Yeah. It's also pivotal that it cannot be blocked. So if something like a chump attack goes through here and the Zoro player wants to get greedy with taking this last life in order to have a few more resources, he could actually fall to this 5-drop Luffy. So he has to be incredibly careful about doing that. How does he sequence these attacks?
I think I'd go for something like a 7-7 rush Luffy and make sure you have the 2 Dawn left to get around the Marco if they leave that alone.
Yeah, so definitely any odd number over 5, so something like a 7 attack here might force the block altogether, and then some combination of rushers or untapped starter deck Laws could get the job done.
Yep.
So I do enjoy just going in, attach 1 Dawn, swing for 7. That seems optimal here.
The awkward thing, and Zoro has done this well here, is they've left 1 Dawn open. Guard point is still an option.
That's true.
It's really going to mess up your math. Now we know, obviously, Fiery Doll and Jozu is in hand, so 7K will be very awkward for our opponent.
Oh, and this 5 is quite good too. Just checks one of the last 2 cards in hand. If you put the Zoro player down to 1 card in hand, it has to be an event in order to stop a 7K attack, or it forces this Marco block. So I do like this 5K
Otama
first.
out. It looks like we're coming in for 6.
Oh, and
Card will not block, so it's either blocking with the Marco or taking the life.
really heads up play, not attaching any Dawn, just recognizing that the Zoro player is very unlikely to have 2Ks in hand.
Yes.
And so just going 5, forcing the 2K out with the first 5, and then only needing 6 in order to connect this attack. So great sequencing from the side of the Law.
It looks like we are opting to use the Marco. We are going to save it with that Fiery Doll finally.
Oh, and this is going
The
to
Bonnie's
be,
coming in.
presumably enough. This has to be guard point. Oh, it's not.
Wow.
And that's it.
A last-second clutch with Jewelry Bonnie putting in one of the finishing touches there as an attacker.
So interestingly enough, the only outs for the Zoro player there at the end were guard point and radical beam. No other combination of cards from the life would have saved them, and he did not find it there, and ends up falling to the rush Luffy. So well played from both players.
Definitely. Let's jump back over to the booth. Be an option. That card has proven to be a house this entire day.
No, Marco has just been incredibly excellent. Paired in combination with something like Gordon's to deal with the future vanillas that Newgate could play. But right now, being that bit of a weaker turn on 3 Dawn turn for the Newgate, we've seen that turn not be as efficient as, starting second and being summoning a 4-cost character. So, but either way, this Newgate player making the most out of it, playing double Ezo, just sculpting the hand to a scenario where he can curve out perfectly. So it all works out in that way.
Also, good attackers back on the buggies if they ever get a little frisky there, so keeping those in check is important.
That is true. Ezo being ranged as opposed to something like Slash will enable them to attack the buggies. And now the buggies not having such a clear attack, even if something like Magros come down. So very good to have those in the early game against Zoro.
This does look like the first point in which Newgate is left with a decision of how will this game be sculpted. It looks like we have 9-drop in hand as an option, or we could play something like, I think, that Crossfire there, saying, okay, we're either going to be very aggressive in keeping our life where it's at, or very just, we'll let the life flow and we'll try and attack back as we can. It does look like Crossfire is the take.
And I'm actually, of course, Crossfire
could be important in the following turns, removing some key card down the line, but incredibly key that he bottomed like the 9 drop, and something like the Zoro match of the 9 drop is essentially like a take an extra turn card in a lot of cases. So I want to see what his perspective is. Maybe he feels like he's just going to go down to 0 life early on in this game, and the 9 drop will lose a lot of its effectiveness. It could also be a consequence of the fact that he went first, like we mentioned earlier, and
True.
the 9 drop might be not on time with how much life he's burning himself for. So a lot of considerations that he had there, but bottom deck in the 9 drop, definitely a key moment in the game.
It does look like Izo is adding Marco. This does give us the ability next turn to be able to go for that.
Yeah, so critically, Zoro has to put a Dawn on the leader and then swing and get a few early game chips in. And okay, so Newgate is deciding we are going down to 0 life early. That's conducive to the fact that he put the 9 drop to the bottom because he was going to go for this line of play. So very expected there, just conserving as many resources as possible. This just getting 1k'd out, and I think this attack is fine to guard because it exposes Buggy, and now Buggy can be attacked on the way back. So making sure that you want to take life, but maybe not all of it right now. So getting...
I think it's also very disciplined from the Zoro side to attack with just a single bug. Just saying, we're going to do a slow push to the advantage. We're not going to expose my entire board here. Just incrementally, yeah, you need to discard some cards, please.
Yeah, so using his Dawn as efficiently as possible, making sure he doesn't just leave 2 Dawn open, decides to swing with one of the buggies to get the value from it now, and then have that Dawn available for the future. So good sequencing there and Dawn assignment from the Zoro, and now from the Whitebeard we get to see that Marco deal with the buggy, and he decides to destroy buggy through an effect instead of attacking into it and curving out with the Marco. And I like this because he's doing two proactive things. He's getting rid of an attacker from the Zoro side while also making his own from his side. So a good play all around.
Yeah, we're entering the Marco phase of the game where Marco comes down, blows your thing up. No, I do it myself. Okay, well, I'll try to do it again. Back and forth as we throw these powerful bodies right against each other.
Yeah, and it feels like after these Marcos, after you run out all the Marcos, there's always going to be the threat of the 5-cost Luffy. We see 2 of those in the Newgate side, and that card is going to be really important to try to leverage some sort of a counter offensive against the Zoro that is right now chipped so much damage from the Newgate.
We do see the Marco come down, deciding which one of the 3 options there. Taking out one of the ranged probably is the slight advantage, although they're all about the same.
So an interesting inflection point there. The Zoro 6k attack was not actually guarded by anything. I don't believe that there were any 1ks in the Whitebeard's hand, and that was the reason why he didn't want to overcommit to defend his life there. But now it's a little awkward because he's going to end his turn and have 0 life on the way back. So something like all-ins are going to start occurring from the side of the Zoro if something like a blocker doesn't show up from the side of Newgate. So
and we do see Newgate kind of feeding into that narrative, right? They say, okay, we're at the end of the life ourselves, so we need to make sure that our opponent is also at that end of life, trying to finish the game as quickly as possible.
And a lot of strategies over the course of the day have chosen to go with this counter punch, like racing situation with the Zoro. Zoro definitely known for his attacking prowess, but defending itself is awkward in certain scenarios. So just saying, okay, if you're going to try to end the game as fast as possible, I'm just going to try and counterattack you in the same speed. And Zoro's quite efficient at that, but not against Whitebeard as a base 6k leader. It's a little difficult to get those numbers in the mid game. So we want to see how well Zoro can actually close this game out.
Does look like the Gordon effect was used. I would assume it's on the Luffy, but it does not look like it was indicated where that went. So
this Luffy is most likely just going to be sacrificed, and the reason for that is it already did its job, right? And at the same time, you don't want to overcommit. It has seen like the Whitebeard player just doesn't want to discard cards from his hand unless 100% obligated, and so he decides, let that Luffy go. I have a second one in my hand.
yeah, it definitely seems like that. It seems like, okay, these resources are for the end of the game. I'll put them away until then, and I'm not going to touch them until then unless I need to.
Very conscious about surviving on all-in from the side of the Newgate player, and how much does Zoro want to invest into this one attack from the leader? We saw in previous games attacks, for example, an attack for 10 and then leaving some Dawn up to do some other proactive action has worked out in the past. So we want to see something like a semi all-in from some of these cards.
Okay, we do see 8 coming across, trying to eat through some of the hand. You could just guard point, you could just discard. Both are options available to you.
I prefer something like the guard point just because it keeps the most cards in hand as possible, at the same time using your Dawn in the most efficient way possible.
Oh.
This is double doll. Oh, okay. So
We are going all in. One big attack, please. What do you have to get out of this?
okay, this is going to be quite a lot of resources expended. Basically, every fiery doll that we see is a guard point from the other side. They're almost going to go 1-for-1 bases on that front, and now he just actually has to get out of the original 6K attacks. So a 2K here should be around good enough. No, actually,
So
he's
that was an
gonna
attack
need a lot more.
It was
yeah.
an attack for 14, so yeah, you'll have to pitch 2K plus 1 more 1K.
And let's see
because you're a
what
6K base.
card he gets fed. He gets fed a 2K there. That's fine.
Okay. A lot of power. Very strong to eat through those cards.
And I
but
wonder if double fire doll was something that the Newgate was considering, because that attack, it felt like he didn't have enough resources to go for something like a 14. But after having taken a 14 to the face, do you feel like the Newgate player is more pressured into trying to end the game? I mean, he doesn't have the resources to be able to do it, so definitely a stressful situation in that way.
yeah, I think the Zoro player has about 3 or 4 cards in hand, which would be enough to probably protect at 2 life still. So you're going to have to find a way to survive through this last little bit here. It does look like we have the Luffy, as previously stated, but we also have Ace in hand, both as rushers. I would probably rather see the Luffy, as it is more cost-effective for the amount that you put in.
And the Zoro player, again, prioritizing those fiery dolls. We've seen builds in the past that didn't tend to gravitate toward that card, but in the new game matchup specifically, with Newgates tending to go to 0 life more frequently, that card is incredibly powerful in that scenario. So
Absolutely.
definitely came in clutch there. And will it be a scenario where, because he had to overguard on the previous turn, he's not going to have enough to deal with these Marco attacking plus leader attack on the following turn? I mean, it just feels like a lot of cards were expended last turn.
Okay, we do see guard point out of that first attack, which means we're not killing this turn. Even with 2 more attacks, it's unlikely that we could get through. So, we can do some life damage.
Oh, we see a trigger here. Okay.
Fire Fist take out Nami. Sure.
Just in case any Magaras, you know, any sort of shenanigans from the Newgate side, but they don't typically play any of those cards. Makino, I guess
They do
is
play
one
Machina.
option.
Yeah, 2Ks.
Yeah,
and look
so
like there's 2 there in the hand, so yeah, that would have been an option out. 6K coming in. Or 6K enters battlefield.
It's actually quite interesting that that event was used in that way, because getting rid of one of the 1-drops here, now does the Newgate player go, okay, attach 1 Dawn 7K to the Zoro leader? If the Zoro actually ends up going down to 0 life, we could see like a double Makino all in on this Izo.
I think that would have to be the play. I don't think you're surviving another turn with what you have left in hand, so yeah, we're going to have to go Makino. Try for an 8K attack and see if that's
Oh, and actually goes through, and there could be a scenario where this double Makino being unexpected, it's enough.
That's the game. Double Makino is enough to finish it out.
Oh, he
A
had
bunch of
nothing.
events,
Wow.
nothing that countered. Wow. That is unfortunate from the side drawing for Zoro, but
Yeah, and he
Newgate
had
does
enough.
take this one.
That's crazy. He had enough to stop 1 Makino and potentially 1 Dawn on it, but not enough for 2 Makinos, and he just ends up
Wow.
dying to an Izo in the end. Wow.
Yeah, let's jump. All right, we are jumping straight into the action, skipping over all the formalities. We've got a match to play. This is round 8 of PPG Regionals here in Orlando. We're getting down to just 2 undefeated tables left. We have chosen here Newgate versus Zoro, a classic matchup tested through time today. This will be Evan, who just won the last round, doing the double Makino to get out of the double fiery doll that had come across previously on the turn before. So we're going to see how he can fare against a new Zoro opponent this time around.
Yeah, and here the Zoros are getting tested by the Whitebeards today for sure. And since this tournament is going to be played until alone undefeated, it's this round and then the following round, and we'll see if we can actually follow Evan throughout the course of his anti-Zoro journey. So
Looks like we're taking a mulligan from the Zoro side. If you're playing Zoro here, what are you kind of looking for in the opening hand? We've kind of talked about this a little bit, but
Yeah, so definitely you want to see Rush Zoro, the 3-drop 5K, because it becomes a 6K base when attacking, and that's a pretty effective attack against what the Whitebeard is doing in general. And you also want to see a couple of searchers, mainly a Curly Dan to get you some important 1-drops like Magro, which can also make your buggies attack. So any of those cards mentioned, just to be able to filter through and kind of make any sort of cobble together attacks that are 6K. So that's what you want to see from the Zoro side.
okay. And it looks like we're all ready to go for our first match here. Newgate is going first, and it looks like we're going to be leading on a searcher here. They've chosen Nami as the correct one.
Nami going to go ahead, and actually we see for the first time today Nico Robin something to smooth out the curve on turn on the 3-Dawn turn from the side of Newgates. Newgates typically just activate a bunch of searchers on that turn or just attack and pass, but this Nico Ramen is going to be incredibly good in the matchup in particular, and also let him use his Dawn efficiently. So awesome to see that for right now.
Yeah, I got a chance to talk to Evan between rounds on stream here, and we talked about what he kind of constructed the deck for to try and fight. And he said Nico Robin is an all-star at matching up in the Zoro matchup. Most definitely. It makes sense, too. It's a great character that can gain an advantage by attacking. So advantage plus aggro can sometimes really pay off for some of these matchups.
And I would like to see it come down on 3, and we'll see if actually Zoro pivots a little bit from implementing a lot of these 1-drops and maybe just hard plays some of the larger bodies that he has access to. Obviously, he has to wait a little bit. Being on the draw, he has to wait until turn 3 to be able to field something like a Marco. But he does go ahead and search it out there just to have it available for the near future. And in the meantime, makes a lot of Ezos. Ezo's not that wonderful of an attacker in the early game, specifically when you don't have things like Magro. And whiff here is a little savage, but
unfortunate.
We have seen Zoro's, survive through whiffing a card or two, but definitely doesn't feel good in a pivotal matchup like this one on future match in round 8 against Nico Robin in particular. So we're going to see if the Zoro can, maintain mental presence, understand that a whiff is not going to mean the end of the world, but at the same time, his hand does look, full of gas, but also a little awkward all at the same time.
Right.
So we'll see how he chooses to develop his threats.
I think this turn's going to have to be a turn of going wide with everything. It looks like we have the Dawn, we have Buggy in hand as options. And then most everything else is either too expensive to play this turn or something I wouldn't advise to go towards, like the Makinos or anything like that. So instead, we'll probably see an equip for one and then option out what the searchers can find for us.
And this is where we're highlighting the fact that Newgate on the play, very pivotal that he got something like a Nami and also this Nico Robin, because let's say, for example, you put 1 Dawn under the leader, and now these Makinos equal 1 attack each. So it's really good that the Newgate player was able to field cards in the early turns and therefore stunt the offensive power of these Makinos. Zoro can no longer play them, and instead he chooses to play Buggy.
Okay, and a Fire Fist is found off this Buggy. It feels like it's just 1 Dawn short of being very impactful this turn.
And over here, Curly Dan is going to go searching.
Looks like we have Ezo as an option. A number of those cards can't be grabbed, it looks like, so pretty easy decision.
Like you mentioned, his only viable option was to go wide on this turn, but like we've seen in earlier matchups, Zoro versus Newgate, the go wide strategy is not as efficient as against other decks, mostly because you are base 6K, so it's a lot more difficult to reach that 6K threshold. You have to put a lot more Dawn on each of your individual 1-drops in order to reach that number. So optimal in the sense of being aggressive, but at least he is sculpting a very good hand for the later portions of the game.
He at least played 2 searchers that are more optimal here, being 3Ks instead of the 2Ks that the Ezos and Namis generally tend to be that really have to work their way up. But I think it's important because Nico Robin is going to start eating the board regardless, so you can play around that a little bit by just trying to go a bit wider and say, okay, you can take 1, but you can't take them all.
And it'd be interesting to see when the Newgate player does actually pivot into using this Nami to swing, because he could say, okay, I get my value out of it this turn, destroying the Buggy or the Curly Dan, or he could wait for the future. If he does turn it sideways, I do suspect that it'll be really easy to get rid of, but he does choose to do so anyway. Now, he's going to get rid of one of these 3Ks, but now the Curly Dan can attack into the Nico Robin without any Dawn investment, and that is a pretty decent attack on the way back. So choosing to use his Nico Robin now, there's no problem with it, but it will be lost on the way back.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult to really protect that in an efficient way, but I think that's okay because we did see our opponent add Fire Fist this last turn, right? So it was going to be
That's
dead either way. So I think getting the usage out of it while you can is just more important sometimes.
And there is something to be said of also attacking Zoro in the early game, chipping out a bit of his life. I do believe he went down to 3 life at this moment, and it's good. Just being aggressive right now lets his rush Luffy's and his future Marcos and maybe even a 9-drop if we see it be a lot more effective later on. So I don't disagree with this Nico Robin getting her hits in when she can. So.
Okay, so we get an untap on the Zoro side. Marcos are an option. I think first and foremost, you want to make sure the Nico Robin is dealt with. I think that you could just hold Crossfire in hand. I'm not even sure we have an event, actually. But I think you just hold Crossfire in hand. I think that might just pay off a Marco bringing it back later type effect. And just earmark it for that.
Yeah, so definitely one of the plays that can happen this turn is Izo on the Nami. See if that gets defended. Obviously, it most likely won't. Then you attach one Dawn to the leader swing. 4K on 4K for the Nico Robin. And I suspect that will also be good enough to destroy it. And if not, you can go 6K with the leader into the Nico Robin and then deal with the last Izo with your Marco in hand. So that sequence of events will likely happen here. Letting it go is very wise, not having to overcommit into defending it from the Zoro leader. The Nico Robin already got its value, like you mentioned before. So
Yeah, and the new gate is really crafting a plan of I'm going to save the cards in my hand until they're absolutely necessary to cast. Something we've seen against most Zoros anyways. Protecting the Nico Robin while the Curly Dan had to invest almost nothing to do what they were doing means that we don't spend that resource on something that isn't our life at the very last moment. So I agree. Totally fine. Just let that die. Get it out of here. We've had our value.
yeah, and now they're going to trade blows, controlling the field back and forth. Nico Robin really providing that space for the new gate player in order to have him reach the mid portion of the game with a safe life total to where he can start developing Marcos and start developing those port gas aces later on as well, with a decent insurance policy and having at the end of this turn 2 life, so not under too terrible of a pressure. And now he's going to be able to deal with this Curly Dan, one would suspect, on the way back. So overall, oh, and we did see a glimpse of that 9-drop in hand, so that might be one indicator of why he wants to protect his life in the early games, because he wants to drop that with 2 or 1 life remaining to honestly seal the deal at this point. We've seen that card just be so powerful.
Right. This is going to be a good Marco turn, just like every turn that has 5 or 6 Dawn in it. But the only problem here is, yeah, you're taking a couple attacks back here that you don't really want to take with this Marco swinging back on you this next turn. So you could option to maybe do, yep, there we go, exactly, the Rush Luffy, and just say, okay, we're going to be aggressive. You're at 3 life. We're going to get you down to 2, and maybe this 9-drop doesn't matter in the game. Maybe I protected, and I'm now changing the plan as the game goes along.
And I like this racing situation the new gate has created. Not dealing with the Curly Dan is good because the Curly Dan is not that efficient of an attacker. Being base 3 against the 6K, you don't want to invest 3 Dawn into making that an attacker. And at the same time, it can't get pumped by anything like Machina or Magura. So just letting Curly Dan alive, it's not worthwhile right now. Instead, going for face damage. And that proves to be a lot better in the scenario, as the Zoro player is now down to 2, the same as the new gate player. But the new gate player, like we saw, has that 9-drop looming. So feels like a decent position to be in.
From the Zoro side, I think you need to answer the Luffy. I think you can't take multiple attacks since you are at 2 life. You're just trying to take that out, make sure we can get 1 or 2 more damage, probably 1 more damage on the new gate, not 2. And then just committing another OK body. And that's a lot of asks all in 1 turn.
So hopefully from the side of Zoro, we get to see some chip attacks for 6K on this Luffy, and at the same time, or maybe using something like a Gordon like we've seen before. We saw a glimpse of it there. Maybe Gordon in combination with Marco number 2 gets the job done.
That is what we see. Gordon's going to come in, bring that down, and now these Izos can just free swing on top of this Luffy and try and take it out.
And This
That
is
will be done.
quite fantastic here because now getting extra value from the Ezo, having his leader attack and the Marco attack available. So Gordon just, again, powerhouse card for being a 1-drop, to be honest.
Definitely.
And he wants to get the Newgate player down to 0. I mean, would be ideal on this turn because that cuts away the 9-drop that has been reasonably telegraphed. If you defend your life in the early game in any way, it probably indicates a 9-drop. So let's see how aggressive the Zoro wants to get. Alternatively, we also don't know how many rushes he has in his hand, so let's see if he uses any resources on playing those as well. So, and
Yeah, I'd like to see something like a Zoro here. That'd be a great body that's added. That means that if we attack that or the Marco, we only have to protect one of them. We don't have to protect both because your opponent can only attack with one of them, unless your opponent has something like Ace, but then they don't have 9-drops. So it all kind of works out in cascading favor there for playing that out.
exactly, only one bomb at a time from the Newgate side. If those get dealt with, it's pretty easy to close out the game for the Zoro. And like we've seen, clear board for the Newgate moving into this portion of the game is not a great sign when facing down a Marco. And how aggressive does the Zoro player want to get? Does he want to commit something like a Makino to make this Ezo attack as well? Does he want to put some amount of Dawn on the Curly Dan to swing as well? It just depends on how he wants to distribute the Dawn, but it feels like any amount of Dawn uses on his turn just for the sakes of attacking face is pretty good. So continues to tax the hand of the Newgate player, one chip at a time.
Looks like we are considering maybe having this rush Zoro I see at the end of the hand incoming. And we also have Makino, it might look like, so even more power could possibly come in, but I think I'd like to save that for next turn. Well,
You see another chip attack for 2, and does he keep defending himself? He does.
he does. Yep, 9-drop is part of the plan, solidly part of the plan.
I do want to see this Newgate player at least go down to 1 life, and the reasoning for that, he gives himself an extra card in hand, and as long as you're at 1, you're not at 0. Any number above a 1, however, is a little awkward because the Zoro player could have, for example, his own 9-drop or something, some bomb to slow the game down. You don't necessarily have to attack the turn that the Newgate player goes for 9-drop Newgate, and leaving a life in play is a little awkward, but we'll see how much of these attacks he actually wants to take versus guard.
I think using guard point here is pretty smart, even though it's an even attack, and you could just pitch a card from hand. You're playing a 9-drop this turn. You're not going to have the Dawn available this turn to be able to cast that.
And so just using his event as efficiently as possible, not leaving it dead in his hand for the following turn. And
yep.
I don't know if fortunately had 9-drop, or maybe unfortunately because he has to give up so much tempo in playing it, but it is his most optimal choice of play. Most of the other cards in his hand are only going to be used as counter power, and he's going to have to hope that this 9-drop Newgate gets him all the way through, but
yeah, I think your opponent looks like they have a difficult time defending this from their hand right now. So it looks like this 8K attack might actually break through, and if it does, that means you have a clear path on the following turn to get through.
does the Zoro player actually just defend here and then put shields up on his own turn, find something like that one of Marco that can't be destroyed by the Newgate and is an effective blocker against it? Alternatively, he could try just to go for a game, even though that seems quite difficult from this position. So definitely not going to be the last turn of the game, so I want to see some discipline from the side of the Zoro player and try to find some defensive option. Discarding the Curly Dan, prioritizing keeping his life total high, which I agree with for sure.
From the side of Newgate, if you're trying to close the game, you're going to need to find something rush. He does have Jozu in hand, so that'll probably be the last thing he tries to pitch, but that is not the optimal rusher. It's a lot of investment for just an extra attack.
And this 8K leader is going to force Marco to put at least 1 Dawn on him in order to take 1 card. Newgate's hand is quite stacked with 2 2Ks and a 1K. And actually has a dead event, but I don't think there are enough attacks from the side of Zoro to really press the advantage here. So, but what defensive options does the Zoro player have? I mean, we haven't seen that much of a glimpse of it. Oh,
We've seen a lot of we saw the. I'm sorry, we didn't see a lot of, but we saw the Fire Fist added, and we see Luffy in hand.
Yeah.
Neither defensive, more trying to finish the game. And finishing the game, swinging up all the way to 8 when this new gate came in to up it is just not really possible.
And at the same time, the new gate player does need some sort of a rush threat because he doesn't have game in play right now. So it could be just a consequence of the Zoro player saying, okay, well, I'll try not to be dead to a rusher, but for the most part, just make my attacks the way that I can and hope I survive on the way back.
I'd like to see, the Marco swing in, and we try and leverage an advantage this way. And that is an attack for 8 total, so you just needed the 1K to get out. I like the Marco attack because the Fire Fist in hand isn't doing anything, and if we kill the Marco, then yes, we can just defend it with the Fire Fist discard. And then I'd like to see probably one sizable attack trying to get 1 life out of Newgate so that they're down to 0 on their next turn, and they won't have any more wiggle room to try and play this game on.
So can the Zoro player do 10-10? I'm looking right now. He invests 4 and 1, so he can only do 10-9, I believe. No, he could do 10-10. And then try to see if...
Yep, there's Izo. I think we're trying to search up something to flip the script here a little bit.
That blocker like we mentioned would be enormous in this scenario, but he only finds a 2K.
2K is fine. Yeah, Jozu not a rush for Zoro. Zoro is not a Whitebeard pirate, so Jozu does not have that effect, even though the new gate side might have that effect.
Let's see now.
I think one large attack with leader would be clutch. I don't think you should expose the Zoro to being attacked in case that would become a plan for the new gate side, and you could just save that attacker in the future should you want that.
I do agree with you in the sense that you want the next turn to be Newgate burns himself for 1.
Yep.
Goes down to 0, and then Zoro tries to clean it up from there. So I do like that perspective. This is, yes, enough with the leader ability. So go ahead and takes 1.
Does get through. Okay, important.
So this guarantees going down to 0 on the following turn. So 1 check mark there.
This looks like just a Luffy played out to the battlefield and not equipped, or you can just do large attack.
This large attack is a little awkward in the sense that this life that the Newgate player took is actually just an extra card in hand.
Yeah,
he was going to burn it at the end of the turn, so you just gave it to him as some sort of a resource that he could use during the main phase of the turn.
Yep.
And at the same time, I feel like now he cut himself off of maybe his life is double guard point or guard point radical beam, and now he doesn't have enough Dawn to actually support defending himself with those cards. So overall, I would have enjoyed just burning the life, letting him burn the life a little more.
I think so, and it might even become more important as that last one was a chopper at the hand. So could be punishing. I don't think it will be, but it's possible.
It's definitely possible. Blockers have been known to throw wrenches in many plans in this game. So
we're coming in for 8 at the Zoro. We see 1 Dawn being held up, so we're playing around guard point, trying to make them take a life there.
The Zoro player, how much does he respect rushers from the side of Newgate? Not very uncommon, but also not very common.
Yeah, you have things like Ace, you have things like Luffy. You're not playing Zoro, but you do have a number of effects that could rush. Like I said, Jozu also a possibility, but not good.
So he has to at least be conscious of that possibility, leave off enough defenses for one of those, and
looks like we're calculating. Should we counter out? Should be no preference in either of the things that is used to counter out here. Jozu and Otama are about the same.
Counters out an 8, so if you believe that the next attack will be lower than an 8 if there is a rusher, then you take this one. Or if you just feel confident that you're going to be able to counter out it no matter what the opponent does after looking at the different outs, like you mentioned, the Ace, the Jozus, things like that. If you've done the math and you know that you're not going to die to one of those, goes ahead and takes it there. And that chopper is looming. Like we've said, he might be important during the end of this turn, but for right now, Newgate just trying to close out in quite an awkward way.
Okay, it looks like we are going to go for an attack. Equipping 2 does give us the effect to KO something of 3K or less, so that the Dawn will hit the graveyard.
So this one we take presumably 100%. Oh, it's going on the character Zoro. Interesting.
I think
So,
that's fine. I think you want to clear the board down so it's not attacking you back.
yeah.
And since we have only 5 or 6 cards from the Newgate side, another 6K attack does represent at least 1 card. And since we drew the chopper, we're just going to try and force 2 big attacks and hope that we can get out of one of them instead.
And this attack on the character Zoro could be a consequence of what we were saying. That chopper that was given to him earlier. If he didn't have that chopper, he might have tried to go for something like lethal on that turn, and then obviously failed, I believe, with the defensive powers that the Zoro had.
Right.
But because he has that chopper now available, he goes to control the field and then try to survive. So, that might actually end up being instrumental.
There was another option of we decided last turn to attack with the Zoro, and then that exposed the Zoro to being attacked this turn. Had we not exposed the Zoro, that would be an option of we could have it this turn to attack for an equal amount.
And a relevant amount, seeing as the player would be at 0 life instead of 1, right? So,
Absolutely.
so definitely all the choices made by the Zoro player, hunting him a little bit in this scenario, but let's see if he can fight through those and try to cobble together some sort of lethal on this turn.
You'd have to attack with Izos. I think that's the way out, and you'd have to hope that you found Makino for the turn, but I think Crossfire, or not Crossfire, I think Fire Fist was found this turn.
So we've definitely seen Evan have Makino on his side, but let's see if Makino's on Steven's side.
It does look like Zoro found 5-drop Marco.
Okay.
So 5-drop Marco can blow up the chopper. You're left with a lot less power of attacking, but it would allow you to get in another attack with the Marco on the table.
So the name of the game is how efficiently can we deal with this chopper in play right now? Like you've said, 5 Dawn looks to be like one way to deal with it. Redistributing the Dawn in a way that forces the chopper block also seems like a decent way to go about it, but that might just end up being 5 Dawn anyway. So.
You could also try and play towards the Luffy that's in the hand. You can try and play around the chopper. The downside with that is if we're trying to play around Crossfire as a card in our opponent's hand, attacking with the leader is so much better for us because Crossfire does not hit those leaders.
Yeah, so some combination of winning the game for the Zoro includes most definitely attacking with leader only as the final dump attack because, again, trying to play around that Crossfire.
Looks like we're just going for a Fire Fist, the cheaper version of using Marco. I like that a lot, actually. I did not think of that line. That's just better. Huh?
And this is actually incredibly important if the Zoro player goes all in with all his Dawn on the Zoro, mitigating the existence of Crossfire. It could make the difference in doing this all in. So definitely want to see him just try to play around that card as much as possible. We see here, again, Crossfire, a good one of in most of these Newgate decks, but it does come back to bite them every now and then when trying to survive all-ins. So
Looks like we equipped 1 there to get in, and this will likely just be the Crossfire, negating that attack.
And this is going to be the main difference. If he doesn't win by 1K, that 1 Dawn on the Marco will have been the difference. It felt like a good way to force out resources from the opponent,
So
but
12, and that looks like exactly.
is it
That's exactly 12.
12? And we're gonna try to get confirmation. Yeah, that was enough. So
Okay, no, that
he
was
had-
enough to get it. I counted wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, whew, we got out of that one.
So he actually had just enough, even with that 1 Dawn investment on the Marco, he actually had the 1K over in his hand. So it would have been Exacxies here in round 8 to have enough to survive the Zoro's
Wow.
attack. And just having that many 2Ks was very good from the side of Newgate. Newgate, again, Evan piloting Newgate expertly and surviving yet another Zoro player. And yeah, just well played in terms of defense from Evan there.
For sure. Let's jump back to the booth.
Some debate as to whether what red deck basically that you wanted to play today would have the best chance of giving you that undefeated record, and it looks like the Gramps is still lone undefeated at the top as the top of the meta, and Evan in particular has shown us he went through at least 2 Zoros over the course of the last 3 rounds to get here, so definitely definitively showing that Newgate has good chops in that matchup, and now he has to win 1 more mirror match.
One more
to get to the end. So.
We do note, we talked about it previously, I think the alt art is stronger, and one of these people does have an alt art and the other doesn't. So we'll have to see how this match does end up going.
So far in the mirror, the alt art has 100% win rate, and we'll see if that remains to be true by the end of this game. Notably, some differences in the builds. Maybe the builds are the same, maybe they are slightly different, but we'll see what variations these players have come up with in order to give themselves an edge in the mirror in particular. But in this matchup, definitely going to be incredibly important to play those 4-drop 6Ks, those Marcos, and whoever sees the 9-drop is significantly ahead, I have to believe. So we'll see if any of that plays out.
Looks like Evan has won the die roll. They'll decide who goes first and who goes second. They're going to prepare their opening hands here.
And like we've been commenting on during the course of the game, is going second actually the preferred play in the mirror specifically. Against aggro decks, maybe going first is good as long as you open up something like that Nico Robin, but in the mirror match, you maybe want to go second because you have a much better curve out, 4, 6, 8. But the person who goes first can 9-drop first, so definitely a back and forth in that sense.
We did see the first time these new gates played on stream today that the new gate that went first won the game. That's not necessarily indicative of anything, but it's a trend. And both of these players are much better at Newgate than I could ever hope to be. So I think we'll get a lot of insight right here. Evan won the die roll. What does he choose? He's already proven to be quite a master of this. So if he chooses to go first or he chooses to go second, it'll be up to him.
It'll be quite indicative of what he chose, whether he actually wanted to go first or second, and he'll be able to curve out in certain ways, depending on. Also, it might also depend on how you construct your build of Newgate. Some builds might be much better going second. Some builds with Nico Robin much better going first. It just all depends on the tools that these players have given themselves in order to eke out a win in this undefeated round 9.
Okay, so we did get a shuffle.
Pretty good for me.
We'll see what the hand looks like.
Until I figure out that you guys are best friends.
It's looking like a card in row, so he's going to fix in really quick.
Yep. From Evan's side, we see Izo, we see Nami. Good searchers to start the game, fill out what you might be looking for in the match. And then we do have Frankie, which is a solid 4-drop in the match. You're going to be very happy with the body that's there. And it all depends whether Evan has opted to go first or second. And it looks like he's opted to go second. All right. So we were a little bit right
The
there.
right track,
we
right?
we're good.
Yeah, so definitely critical to try to get in the early game against aggro matchups, specifically Zoro. You want to see those 1-drops. In this mirror match, it's not going to be too particularly important because these small characters don't actually attack that much. They're not that efficient at doing so. So skipping turn 1 isn't too terrible. I did catch a glimpse of Andrew's hand at the beginning of the game, and it did not seem that optimal. So we're going to have to see if he gets some sort of a searcher or a 4-drop moving into the next round, or he's going, or a 3-drop moving into the next turn, or he's going to be slightly behind here.
It's definitely not optimal in the fact that it's double thatch. 1 thatch, fine. 2 thatches, you're not playing both of those within a game. So one of those will just be pitched, and there are a couple of events which are clogging up. But the power of Newgate is I'm going to be able to find a bunch of cards in my life as I take them at the end of the turn.
Yeah, so he goes ahead and trades 1 life on each side here by attacking with 2 Dawn. Hold up 1 Dawn for any sort of guard point that he wants to do. Goes ahead and takes a burn damage and then an attack. And then
see the Frankie.
A pass turn after franking. So
the board does look scary, but Frankie is mostly the only thing that's really scary on the board. So we can be behind Temple a little bit from Andrew's side, but we just need to play something this turn to fight back towards it.
And a good pickup here, a King Do 5-drop 7K from the side of Newgate.
Yes, King Do is the perfect draw here.
Both players taking life aggressively. We've seen this in the past. Both Newgate players previously also went down to 0 life, so it seems to be like that is just the correct approach in the mirror match. And like we said before, we didn't want to give too much importance to the play draw, but definitely making Andrew go first in this game seemed to be quite detrimental.
The curve has been slightly off. The first life loss has been a little bit unfortunate, but you do get first crack, that first extra turn, quote unquote, of, you can have a turn before your opponent does.
And then now we're going to get to see that Frankie, like you mentioned, chopped, go in for a little bit of chip damage. That's what I meant to say. And then see if the Newgate actually aggressively takes this, and he does. I mean, taking here is fine because the next life is also kind of like just a free padding on the life total, going down to 0. But like we saw, in previous rounds, the first Newgate player to go down to 0 is the first one who has to give up a few cards in hand to survive, those 10k attacks.
Yep.
And it becomes a little bit of a liability. So nowhere close to a 9 drop either. So
This attack for 6 comes across. It looks like we've counting on the fingers is necessary to go to the next step, which is fine.
So it's like 6 on 6. I do suspect that 1k is good enough. He's most likely.
Yep, there we go with the thatch.
So taking it there was also fine because he was going to burn it. Either way, he wants to defend it
And
just in case there was. Oh, and there was a rusher after. So defending it there, it was going to end up having to discard that 1k anyway. So.
Yeah, I think the rusher not attacking is pretty smart. Leave it up. Your opponent might rely on those fossas like we saw in a previous matchup or a chopper. And having that back and not exposed to the attack of the King Do is probably better.
And something that we didn't see in the mirror match previously, this Luffy actually incredibly broken in the scenario because he is going to be able to swing at a 0 life Andrew for 16. Oh, is he at max done right now? He's going to be a large number, that's for sure. So if he wants to just all in with this Luffy for the rest of the game, he can.
Yeah, I think it'll be just 7 next turn. I believe is the turn we're on. Or, I'm sorry, just 8, rather. Yeah, the Fossa in hand doesn't look quite as good when this Luffy's on the table. You're looking for hopefully something like a Jet Pistol, which many of these decks don't often play nowadays.
Good to see here.
Ezoing. Stick around.
Let me see the Fossas.
The Fossas.
So just in the face of this Luffy looking a little detrimental, but.
Figuring out the Dawn left, how we're going to approach this.
Also, what does this King do this turn? Because getting rid of that last life from the side of Evan doesn't really mean that much, and at the same time, exposing the King Do does mean a lot, because defending him through something like an ace would be kind of awkward. So maybe not attacking with the King Do would be advisable. But
Ace is definitely a play you can consider and think around. Your opponent can build up just a bigger board for the following turns. But I think most attacks are just going to come straight at your life. 7k is higher than 6k in math, and your opponent is just going to naturally want to attack your face, as you're going to have to protect that in the first place. So I think exposing attack is fine. You can try and take out the Frankie as possibly another attacker, another card that you'll have to discard. But the Luffy is really just looming, right?
it is, and just this Luffy not being able to be blocked in a scenario where Newgate has no other choice but to go down to 0. And
We see Fossa. We see Fossa.
but are these going to be enough? There is a consideration for the Evan Newgate player on the left to just make an attack for what would you think would be a good number 12 maybe, and then play something like a chopper.
I think you do these first tester attacks. Just small attacks, get them out of the way. Your opponent might be forced to block, or they might just get cards out of hand. Once you've gotten the cards out of hand, now you're going to consider, is an attack with Luffy viable? If it's not viable this turn, I think it's just best to wait. Just gain some more Dawn, do an attack on a future turn that is larger, and play more to the board. You could do that ace play that we had talked about and just play that out and force them to deal with it that way. Your opponent's leaving up Dawn, so they're becoming inefficient the farther we go on with this game. And if the Luffy is threatening that bad that they have to keep keeping that up, they're going to lose that ability, I think.
And at some point, leaving the Luffy up and not attacking with him is going to force these forces to block, something as small as a 6k, 7k, 8k, just because you want to get value out of them before the inevitable Luffy attack, like you mentioned before. So good assignment of Dawn from Evan. We've seen him play quite masterfully over the course of the games, and he's doing really well, understanding what the matchup is about. The entire matchup coming down to that unblockable Luffy in play. So
we do see 6 come across here. That does mean that the Luffy will probably hang back this turn, just trying to eat some of the cards out of the hand, force the opponent to just respect the Luffy on a future turn instead of now. And then if our opponent decides that blocking is the way, we can just try and force that issue too by Makino, attack, and then play a chopper of our own defending ourselves.
yeah, so I really enjoy that Evan is understanding his position in the game. He's ahead in tempo, and he's just leveraging that by attacking for 6k on a couple of his cards, forcing out some chip damage, not choosing to make this turn the quote-unquote all-in turn with that Luffy, understanding that that Luffy can go in at any point. It doesn't have to be
Right.
right now, so just make it as efficiently as possible when he does inevitably attack with it. So
Okay, and
do
here comes
enjoy that.
Chopper. And I think we just hold up the rest for guard points and other events in hand. Coming back to Andrew's side. Andrew's plan of attack now is, can I answer the Luffy? And if I can't, I'm going to need to gain enough power, counter power, to get out of the attack.
Yeah, and this Chopper stalls a little bit of the possibility to go for lethal, because now Andrew can't just simply put everything on something like a King, do an attack per game. So he's going to have to distribute his attacks more favorably to play around that Chopper, or just simply go little by little. But does he have enough time?
It does look like Andrew can get out of this attack. That is 3 guard points plus Radical Beam. That is a lot of counter power.
That's a good
So,
amount.
we're playing this game for longer. It's not over this turn by any means. So I think we need to make sure we're obviously leaving up about 3-4 Dawn, whatever you feel like the number is based on your calculations. And then we're going to do attacks in to try and force cards from our opponent's hand, so that on the following turn, when they've tried to kill us and they've overextended, we're going to go right back and kill them on that backswing.
Yeah, and we're going to see, just contemplate his options. Final round, final game. Want to make sure both players do everything as perfectly as they can. And both players having aces in the forefront of their hand, obviously symbolizing that the rush keyword on that card is quite important in a game state like this. But 8k, and it's just going to be...
Okay, eats a guard point out of the hand, but it's, again, we're trying to eat the counter power up, so I'll find use.
Yeah, now the stage of the game where both players are attacking effectively life every turn for as efficient of an attack as possible with each other characters, and this 8k took an event card, which is good enough to expect from that. Now
So
we're going to
coming
go
for
6k.
6.
Seven.
Eats an Ezo. Yeah, the name of the game at this point seems like 6k attacks. Attacking larger means it could still, like if I attack 2k over, it could be 2 cards, but every single 6k attack is just 1 card. And the amount of cards in hand, I think, is important to the new game matchup. It's not about the amount of counter power, because everybody's got a lot of counter power. It's about the number of cards. So just trying to eat those events out, I think, is the name of the game.
Yeah, and then eventually, once one of the new game players runs out of events, a lot of the 2Ks will be forced out awkwardly. And then once that happens, they'll inevitably take the last damage and be defeated. So definitely want to use the events in particular as efficiently as possible. So here, a lot of Makinos in Evan's hand. So that Nami attack going into the Ezo, indicative that he wants to take the game a little bit slower. He's not trying to do all-ins. Like you mentioned, he's just chipping in again with a 6k attack.
Yep.
All of these attacks essentially, like you said, equal 1 card in life. I mean hand. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. And then we do still have Makinos, but we have these on the table that can be used in conjunction with those. Should we think that's important? I think that's a last-ditch effort into what we want to do.
And how large is this Luffy attack going to be? So far, he is holding 7 Dawn in his hand. And I think what he's trying to do is force out all these events and then try to go in with this Ezo as the final punch.
I think this is a Luffy attack, and then I think we can actually still protect ourselves on the following turn, is the interesting thing. We have enough counter power in hand that your opponent can swing on the Luffy or you, and it's about equal. You're going to save either of them. And now they're missing enough on board that the Chopper can block once, and the other attack just won't get through.
Yeah, so Evan looking like he's taking commanding position in this game, again being the first one that started chipping away at Andrew's life. And in the mirror, like we've seen, that's the formula to success, and he's following through with that plan, making sure that he didn't all in too soon and lose effectiveness there. All-inning on this turn looked quite effective as he took upwards of 3 cards, and patience paying off for him again.
Yeah, now we're down to, looks like 3 guard points and an Otama. Maybe a total of 11k out of the hand, which means that all-inning on Luffy again doesn't get there, but you do have the leader attack, you do have the Frankie attack, and other things that can go in conjunction with that. So we will see if that might be enough to hold off if the attacks don't come down the correct way, or if they do.
And then now, Ace is the perfect card to utilize in this situation, but...
Rush is important. You're still holding up 3 Dawn for all the guard points in hand, so you're all protected there. A great plan from Andrew, as he probably calculated last turn that, okay, this will be the plan after the attacks come in.
So something like, oh, and lets the Luffy go. So staying there.
I think once the ace comes down, it's impossible to protect either of
Yeah.
these. And this Fossa now is kind of reigning a little bit on the board.
So the Fossa actually matters in this case now that the Luffy's not there anymore. And with triple guard point, like you mentioned, 11 counter power total, is there a viable ending to the game for Evan on the following turn, or is he going to have to survive 2 turns in a row from here? And like you mentioned before, this Frankie, probably not long for this world. So.
No, being -3 means you'd have to like Radical Beam plus something, or Guard Point plus like a discard of Jozu.
And I suspect if he let...
Although this is the last attack, though.
Right.
Which means that you could counter out of this attack and still have the thing on the table, plus have the blocker still in the future. But it looks like the option is to let it go.
Was there a world where he just goes, okay, I'm going to go all in on defending either of those and then tries to do a counteroffensive for lethal? I mean, if he even if he discards, let's say he has 10 cards in hand, discards like 8 cards from his hand to have the Luffy unblockable survive that turn, I feel like he does just win on the way back, potentially, so it's always a consideration. But that Fosha not letting the new gate get through, I mean, it's difficult to know just how much counter power.
Yeah, it's tough to say. I'm not exactly sure. I didn't do the math there.
Andrew only has 4 cards in hand, but it just so happens that he has a lot of counter, it being 3 guard points, so.
Looks like we do have an ace turn here, so now we're acing at our opponent. And we're going towards the lead.
Guard point here, and a passive turn. Chopper's still pretty commanding in a position like this, and there's, I would hope, enough counter power to deal with any amount of attacks here. I mean, I see so many events from the side of Evan. None of them have been forced out yet.
Yeah, so with a chopper on the field, you want to split your attacks as pretty evenly as possible. Coming in for 8 is fine. Just try and eat a guard point out of the hand. And then you could try and split these attacks. Let's see. A total of 4 and 5, so that's
It's another 8
2 12s, but you can also... Okay,
Another point.
that's fine.
Yeah. These 2 guard points very effective at dealing with the 2 AK attacks from the side of Andrew. And now Andrew has
With
to
Marco
deal.
in hand. Aha. It keeps coming up.
It
Marco
keeps coming
blocks,
up, yeah.
blocks, gets rid of the chopper.
But is it Don efficient enough? And another thing to consider is that Evan actually did not utilize the -4K on only character cards.
Sure.
So it's now sitting there dead, but it's because he actually has Radical Beam as his last card,
Yeah.
so he's prioritizing using that instead. So very cool.
He used guard point previously in the turn already twice, so it was the guard point's effectiveness versus the Radical Beams. Crossfire could be used, and it's possible it comes down to that Crossfire not being used, but it feels like this match is ending almost before then.
You see here, Evan does in fact survive the turn pretty efficiently, still with a large hand size. I mean, it's even possible that he gets to survive the next turn too if he wanted to.
You see 8K come in, they're still testing for guard points, and they're still getting guard points out of each other. They just have a grip full of these cards.
This is showing both Newgate players showing a lot of patient understanding that number of attacks for 8K is the name of the game, and then once one player runs out of guard points, that'll be the time to actually all in.
And here comes the large attacks that we're expecting. I'm expecting a Makino will be the other one here, and that one will swing in with one of these Nami or Izos on the battlefield.
And is this the attack that gets blocked here? I would suspect.
9K can still be guard point plus 2K, but I'm not sure Andrew has all of that in hand. I think Andrew might just have 2 cards in hand, truthfully.
We might have a champion as early as the next couple of plays here. Let's just see how Andrew tries to navigate through these very difficult attacks using what appears to be the last event available in his hand.
That's everything.
Doing everything. So now cards are on the table for Evan. If Evan has Makinos in hand to try to leverage these 1-drops in order to go for gain, can he do it? He has 1.
They'll go for 6. That'll command a block.
And
then an attack for 6
this will
total.
be 6 total. And
Evan
that'll be
wins.
it. And there we go.